Chapter 224. I'm not very good at talking. When Zhu Shiyao, like a shy little girl, said this sentence, Wang Lu inwardly sneered. Could it be that the next sentence is, "What did I do to offend you that you *king want to hit me?" However, the next moment, Zhu Shiyao pulled out the sword from her waist, and the bewildered look on her face disappeared. Instead, a biting cold intent that was even more severe than ice spread out from her pair of eyes. Therefore, I will demonstrate it with a sword. As soon as her voice fell, the world changed color. In Wang Lu's eyes, the world suddenly turned into black and white. The distant mountains and rivers were shrouded behind a fuzzy-colored glaze cover, no longer clear. Inside the glaze cover, a haze floated up. Even Lu Li, who was very close to him, seemed to have lost her vitality and turned into a dead thing. Between heaven and earth, only Zhu Shiyao and the ancient sword in her hand were still glowing with color. Zhu Shiyao stood there with the sword in her hand. She and the sword gradually merged into one, emitting an incomparably sharp sword light. Everything around her was dimmed by the light. Wang Lu felt that it was gradually difficult to breathe, as if his heart was being held by an invisible force. Just as Wang Lu shook his jade mansion and void core, trying to expel this indescribable abnormal feeling from his body, the sharp sword light suddenly became 10 times more intense. Wang Lu subconsciously narrowed his eyes, but because of the focus, his eyes became even sharper. Facing the intense sword light, he clearly saw the true appearance of the light. It was countless fragmented light that blended together, emitting a sword light as blazing as the sun. And this sword light was clearly the Stellar Peak secret technique, Stellar Sword Qi. And looking at the momentum of this sword light, it was clearly coming for him. Wang Lu was inwardly shocked. He never thought that Zhu Shiyao would actually attack him in full view of the public. The power of the Stellar Sword Qi was enough to split the mountain and reverse the river, but now, without any concealment, it came whistling towards him. Almost subconsciously, Wang Lu summoned his sword of Mount Kuan and reluctantly used his non-phase sword art to parry the incoming attack. His 3-feet sword defense unfolded, propping up an unbreakable defense. However, in the next moment, Wang Lu felt a chill on his forehead. A speck of dust fell on his head like a cold star. What? The 3-feet sword defense was broken? Wang Lu instinctively took half a step back in shock. Voila! As if he had stepped on a piece of glass, Wang Lu clearly heard a clear shattering sound. Then, thousands of crisscrossing cracks filled his vision, and the world of black and white collapsed. What replaced it was still the colorful 4 divisions peak. The floating clouds on the horizon were still lazily floating, and the mountain breeze still carried a trace of fresh fragrance. It was just that, the surroundings seemed exceptionally quiet. The hundreds of disciples who were originally noisy were now silent. When Wang Lu looked at them, he saw that all of them maintained their retreating posture. Some of them even fell to the ground, their faces were stiff, and some of them had large beads of sweat on their faces. Thinking about it, the illusion of his skull being pierced by the Stellar Sword Qi just now was not unique to him. Forcibly suppressing the throbbing in his heart, Wang Lu had figured out the principle of Zhu Shiyao's move. This was Zhu Shiyao's demonstration. She couldn't speak, so the only way she could express it was with her sword. Her harvest from this trip to the southern heaven region was all in that sword strike just now. That sword strike might be her own sword intent, or it might be an illusion that was amplified by a high-rank spiritual treasure. However, in short, under her sword strike, none of the hundreds of cultivators of Spirit Sword Sect could withstand it head-on. Even Wang Lu was no exception. The awe-inspiring might of the big sister of Spirit Sword Sect was undoubtedly revealed. At this moment, there seemed to be thousands of thoughts turning in Wang Lu's mind, but he was at a loss. Perhaps it was just an illusion, but everything that he experienced was so real. In his mind, the scene of Zhu Shiyao's Stellar Sword Qi attack, and him being unable to resist it took a long time to disappear. Wang Lu believed that if he really fought with Zhu Shiyao, the result would not be any different from the illusion. Even the world's strongest non-phase sword defense could not block that unpredictable Stellar Sword Qi. At this time, when he recalled the confrontation just now, every moment was particularly clear. How he propped up his sword defense in the first place, and how that Stellar Sword Qi broke his defense, had already been deeply imprinted in his mind. In terms of pure attack power, although Zhu Shiyao's Stellar Sword Qi was powerful, it was far inferior to Lu Li's brilliant sword heart, the destructive power of the 12 flying swords combined into one. However, There was a trace of elusive profoundness in her non-phase sword defense. His own non-phase sword defense didn't have any flaw, yet it was directly pierced through the non-existent flaw, and then came out. This was obviously unreasonable, but compared to complaining about the reasonableness of it, it was better to find a plausible explanation. Wang Lu frowned and thought deeply about the reason. Unknowingly, time quickly slipped away. After an unknown amount of time, Wang Lu suddenly woke up. He saw that the crowd around him had gradually dispersed, and Zhu Shiyao herself had disappeared without a trace. Only some cultivators were still immersed in their thoughts like him. The noisy onlookers' ceremony hurriedly came to an end. Although there were still unsolved doubts in his mind, Wang Lu also knew that now was not the time. He patted Lu Li beside him, ready to call her to leave. However, he heard Lu Li softly snort. Her body leaned forward and was about to fall. Wang Lu hastily held her up. The girl's face was pale, and the corner of her mouth overflowed with blood. Unexpectedly, she suffered an internal injury. Wang Lu recalled that just now, under Zhu Shiyao's sword strike, hundreds of disciples on the square retreated. Even he himself had to take half a step back. Some of the others even retreated more than 10 steps. Only Lu Li, not only did she not retreat, she even withstood the pressure and took a step forward. It's indeed fierce and valiant. Unfortunately, other people's minds were only affected by it. Only you were injured by the backlash of your magical power going astray. Why bother? Wang Lu sighed with emotion that Lu Li would always be Lu Li, but at the same time, he also felt distressed for the little girl's injury. He could no longer ponder over the mystery of stellar sword qi, and immediately stuffed an expensive healing pill into her mouth. Then, he took Lu Li back to the Brilliant Peak to see his fourth uncle Zhou Ming. Seeing that Lu Li was injured, Zhou Ming didn't blame Wang Lu. He just frowned and sighed. This child is still eager to win. Wang Lu curiously asked. Why do you say that? Zhou Ming explained, just now, when Yao Er stimulated her sword intent, do you understand the principle behind it? Wang Lu said, although I don't know the details, it should be a kind of illusion. Zhou Ming corrected, it's stellar diffraction technique. Stellar diffraction technique also has this effect? Wang Lu curiously asked. Could it be that what I saw just now was the scene deduced by stellar diffraction technique? Zhou Ming said, yes, the essence of stellar diffraction technique is to see through the change of cause and effect, reflecting all kinds of possibilities in the future into your perception. Yao Er used her supreme sword intent to stimulate stellar diffraction technique, and then the result was reflected in each of your hearts. Thus, in your eyes, it was as if you were really fighting with Yao Er. Wang Lu clicked his tongue and said, and then she couldn't even block one sword strike and was defeated. Big sister is indeed big sister. As soon as she returned to the mountain, she couldn't wait to show everyone her strength. Zhou Ming smiled and said, you misunderstood her. She doesn't have such complicated thoughts. Senior brother asked her to demonstrate the harvest of this experiential learning to you, and she just acted according to the order. This extreme diffraction sword language is her harvest in the Southern Heaven Sword Tomb. Before this experiential learning, she couldn't do it to this extent. Moreover, don't you think that being dragged into the illusion of stellar diffraction technique by her sword language and personally experiencing her stellar soul sword is also beneficial to your cultivation? Hee, it's okay. Wang Lu smiled and vaguely responded. Indeed, after Zhu Shiyao's sword defense was broken, he was shocked, and Wang Lu faintly realized that there seemed to be many details of the non-phase sword art that needed to be perfected. If it weren't for this sword, perhaps he wouldn't have discovered it. Yao Er is the big sister of Lingjian School, so she has the obligation to guide the cultivation of her fellow disciples. Since she's not good with words, she used her sword language to show off her cultivation base and also let her fellow disciples gain something. This is killing 2 birds with 1 stone. Zhou Ming said and somewhat helplessly looked at Lu Li, who was curled up on the bed to recuperate. Unfortunately, this child Lu Li still can't let go. Zhou Ming said and then sighed. You've been with her for the longest time, so you should be able to see that although this child is naive and without scheming, she's not without ideas, just eating and waiting to die. She's very devout in the way of the sword, and she's also very persistent in every opponent in the way of the sword. These years, you've fought with her for more than 1,000 times, so you should have a deep understanding. Wang Lu was silent. Uncle Zhou Ming was right. No matter how cute and silly Lu Li usually was, once she held a sword in her hand, it was as if she had changed into a different person.
Her devout devotion to the way of the sword was even higher than his own.
These years, in more than 1,000 sword fights, Lu Li lost more than she won. However, Wang Lu could always see the desire to win in her clear eyes. And in the face of Zhu Shiyao's stellar sword Qi, Lu Li would rather be injured to fight for that slim chance of winning. Obviously, although she usually admitted that her cultivation base was not as good as Zhu Shiyao's, deep in her heart, she didn't want to admit defeat. If there was a chance, she would always fight for victory. Unfortunately, in the end, she didn't get what she wanted. Looking at the curled-up Lu Li, the girl's brows slightly wrinkled as if she was still in a coma. Wang Lu sighed with emotion and gently touched her cheek. Why would the weak fight? However, he remembered that he was also defeated in one sword strike, so he didn't seem to have the qualification to laugh at others. After a while, Wang Lu got up to leave and walked outside. Just as he walked out of the door, he felt a strange fluctuation coming from outside the courtyard. The surrounding air became a bit colder. Then, a small, slightly helpless voice rang out. Fourth Martial Aunt, I followed Master's instruction to come, to see junior sister Lu Li. The voice was stuttering and full of jerkiness, as if it was difficult to recite unfamiliar lines. A moment later, the eldest martial sister of Lingjian's school didn't wait for anyone to greet her. She walked straight into the courtyard, holding a basket of fruits in her hand, and met Wang Lu, who was walking outside. Wang Lu suddenly stopped and was thinking about how to greet the eldest martial sister. However, he saw that the other party didn't stop and went straight into the room. From the beginning to the end, she didn't even look at Wang Lu, completely ignoring him. My goodness, the eldest martial sister of Lingjian's school is really arrogant. Wang Lu's heart was moved, and some words were about to come out of his mouth. However, he immediately remembered that he was defeated by her. So what was the use of saying empty words? Thus, he suppressed it. Just now, he lamented that he didn't have a short-term goal after the experiential learning in Grand Cloud Mountain. Now, didn't a goal come knocking on his door? The eldest martial sister of Lingjian's school. This title was really cool, much more domineering than the lead disciple. Just you wait, sooner or later, I will sign a contract with the immortal beast and become the eldest martial sister of Lingjian's school. Hey, wait a minute, something seems wrong? Chapter 225. Master, urgent help. After returning to Non-Phase Peak from Brilliant Peak, Wang Lu immediately sought outside assistance.
His master was indeed his master. She very righteously said, "Ha ha ha, young man, looking at your gloomy glabella and sad face, presumably, the bitterness of being lovelorn has welled up in your heart, and you need a mature and charming woman to soothe your pain."
Wang Lu was silent for a long time, and then seriously said, "Actually, I have seriously reflected on it. The Grand Cloud Fairy is a peerless beauty. Not being able to keep her is my biggest regret in my 10 years of cultivation. Indeed, I miss her because of this, but rather than saying that I'm heartbroken, I'm more moved by her selfless sacrifice. Moreover, even if there is any pain, seeing your shameless face, I can't feel sad anymore." His master indifferently chuckled and said, "You have the right to be stubborn. Say it, what is it? It's not easy to make you beg me." Wang Lu said, "There are not many places where you can be of use. Of course, it's about cultivation. I want to know how to beat Zhu Shiyao." His master was suddenly stunned. "Zhu Shiyao? How did you get involved with her?" Wang Lu thought for a moment and felt that this question was quite difficult to answer. If he directly told him that it was because he was angry because he was treated as a nobody in Brilliant Peak, it would be too narrow-minded. If he said that he was unwilling because he was forced to retreat by a sword on 4 Divisions Peak, it would also not be magnanimous enough. Therefore, Wang Lu coldly said, "Because one mountain cannot accommodate 2 tigers." His master scolded, "Fart. One mountain cannot accommodate 2 tigers. Then what are Feng Yin and Lu Xian, sick cats? Since when did it become the turn of a disciple like you to be the king? I am the sun in the morning. Then Zhu Shiyao is the haze that covers the sky. You really chose the wrong opponent this time." His master spread out his hands and said, "If you want to fight head-on, you can't win." This answer really surprised Wang Lu. After seeing Zhu Shiyao's amazing stellar divine sword, Wang Lu was very clear about the gap between him and her. However, after careful examination, it was not necessarily as different as cloud and mud. Although his non-phase sword art was broken, It was only because he was caught off guard for a moment. As long as he was slightly on guard, he would still be able to fight. Zhu Shiyao's level of cultivation was similar to his, so there was no reason for her to be that much stronger than him. Therefore, he expected that she would only need to practice hard and learn a few new moves, and then she would be able to turn the tables. If 1 year wasn't enough, 3 to 5 years should be enough. Unexpectedly, Master's conclusion was so decisive. Seeing the surprise on Wang Lu's face, his master could guess what he was thinking.
After pondering for a while, as if organizing his words, he lightly explained, "You should have heard of the Son of Destiny."
Wang Lu nodded his head.
Although this was already the sect's secret, as a successor disciple, he had lived in the mountain for 10 years, so he more or less knew some of it. The so-called Son of Destiny was usually the precursor of the coming of a great era, the sustenance of the destiny of the 9 regions. These people, with the Son of Destiny, could often achieve an amazing career. Great ancestor Dushing and immortal Qin were such examples. And Wang Lu was the Son of Destiny that the sect leader saw in the prophecy 10 years ago. Although the process was also accompanied by a misunderstanding. As far as Wang Lu knew, the Lingzhen school's immortal gathering 10 years ago was precisely to absorb the Son of Destiny. After he entered the mountain, he spent several years to gradually shine, which gradually made the title of the Son of Destiny well-deserved. Therefore, even if his usual behavior was occasionally out of line, the elders would not care too much about it, except for the most strict disciplinary elder, Feng He. This was undoubtedly the advantage of being the Son of Destiny. Then why did his master bring up this topic? When big sects do things, they rarely gamble. Therefore, in order to cope with the wave of the next great era, Lingzhen School has made a lot of preparations. In short, you're not the only Son of Destiny. Not to mention in 9 regions, even in Lingzhen School, there are substitutes for you. Wang Lu was slightly surprised. So it's the big sister?
Of course, Lu Li can also be counted, but her weight is a bit lighter. Before you entered the mountain, Zhu Shiya was the one that everyone had the highest expectation of. Although she didn't have the characteristics to confirm the prophecy, she was too powerful. So much so that, after the calculation at that time, even if there's really a Son of Destiny, it might not be able to beat her. In fact, until now, in the sect leader's heart, your weight and hers are still equal.
Equal?
His master said, yes, objectively speaking, your weight is still a bit heavier. After all, relying on one's own force is not enough to entrust a sect. Whether it's Lu Li or Zhu Shiyao, as a cultivator, both of them are the top, but their character flaws are doomed to be unable to lead others as the leader of the sect. But you, at least, have proved yourself with the wisdom sect. But on the other hand, if you don't have some crooked talent, you're not qualified to be compared with Zhu Shiyao.
That ruthless? His master resolutely said. That ruthless.
But, why do you have to go to a dead end? If your strength is inferior to others, you can use your IQ to gain a sense of superiority. Zhu Shiyao is not as stupid as Lu Li, but in front of you, she's definitely not smart. Moreover, although Zhu Shiyao is extremely strong, she is actually very weak as well. She has a fatal weakness, and it just so happens that her combat intelligence is inferior to Liu Li's, who possesses the brilliant sword heart. So for you, grasping her weakness is as easy as lifting a finger. After a pause, Wang Wu simply pointed out the problem. Simply speaking, if you and Zhu Shiyao are put in a life-and-death fight on the arena, 9 out of 10, she would win. However, if you put it in an extremely complex environment, your probability of winning is much higher. Therefore, in the previous 2 experiential learning opportunities, the sect leader sent you to the Grand Cloud Mountain, while she went to the Southern Heaven region. You see, if you look at the problem this way, isn't it a lot easier to accept?
Wang Lu coldly snorted.
What's the use of adjusting the financial accounting if you can't earn money? If you can't win, then you can't win. Looking for a reason will only make you look weaker.
His master applauded without any sincerity.
Well said. You're indeed my disciple. Your moral integrity is simply overflowing. Then, please develop your style and use your iron bones to fight against Zhu Shiyao's stellar soul sword. I wish you good luck.
He didn't get any valuable help from his master.
Wang Lu knew that it was mostly because his master really had no way to help him. Zhu Shiyao's strength was so absolute and unshakable. A day later, Wang Lu closed his eyes and tried to recall the amazing sword that turned the whole world black and white.
However, he still couldn't see the slightest chance. The stellar sword Qi was not strong, but it was exquisite enough. It was so exquisite that it could penetrate through the flaws of Nanfei's sword. Wang Lu tried to deduce it several times. No matter how he changed the sword's momentum, the stellar sword Qi would accurately and coldly pierce his forehead. Nanfei's sword was by no means a crude sword technique that only relied on brute force. However, under the contrast of that exquisite stellar sword Qi, it seemed clumsy and full of flaws. This was simply strange. Wang Lu's Nanfei's sword art could be considered as having experienced hundreds of battles. Whether it was a low-level loose cultivator like Yi Chuchen, an elite disciple of the five uniques like Zhao Zhongyuan, or a profound Taoist master of Yuanying stage like Tiger King, he had fought them all. No one could use pure skill to break Nanfei's sword art. Before Zhu Shiyao, Wang Lu didn't even consider this possibility. There must be some mystery in this. Considering that his master said she had a fatal weakness, Wang Lu, while pacing outside the cabin, gradually formed an idea in his mind. Could it be that the secret of Zhu Shiyao's strength was? At this time, a golden sword light rapidly flew from the sky. Although the sword's momentum was fast, it was not sharp. Wang Lu's train of thought was interrupted by the sword light. When he took a closer look, he saw that it was a flying sword that was specially used to deliver letters. "There's a letter for me?" At this time, Wang Lu curiously reached out his hand to catch the flying sword and took down the letter. When he opened it, he was taken aback. The envelope impressively had the imprint of the 10,000 Arts sect. As for the sender, as expected, it was Hai Yunfan. It had been a long time since he last saw him, but in the past few years, he had been writing to his good pen pal, Hai Yunfan. His correspondence with Hai Yunfan had been frequent, but it was rare to see him use such an extravagant way to send a letter. Generally speaking, it was through Shun Feng Line's ordinary mail, with an interval of 3 to 4 days. However, this golden flying sword could guarantee to arrive at the destination within half a day, which was very expensive. When he opened the letter, Wang Lu was even more surprised. Because it was not the usual ordinary letter paper, but the extremely precious shadow letter paper, a precious tool that could be used for instant communication. The letter paper was in duplicate. When one wrote on one of the paper, the same handwriting would appear on the other side, which could be used for instant communication. The advantage was that this kind of dialogue was highly secretive, which could not be eavesdropped by others. Moreover, it was usually not limited by space. No matter where the two sides were, they could talk using this, which was somewhat similar to the spirit sword heavenly talisman. Since Hai Yunfan sent this kind of letter paper, it was obvious that he had something important to discuss with him. Wang Lu gently touched the golden flying sword and left his own magical power imprint to prove that the letter had been received. Then, he held the letter paper and returned to his room. After sitting down at the desk, Hai Yunfan's handwriting appeared on the letter paper. "Brother Wang, it's been many years since we last met. I really miss you." Wang Lu immediately picked up the pen and wrote, "Less nonsense, get down to business. I want to ask about your sect's successor disciple, Zhu Shiyao. Does Brother Wang know anything about her?" Wang Lu immediately cursed, suppressed the confusion in his heart, and wrote, "Why do you want to ask about her?" 1.5 months ago, the ancient sword tomb in the southern heaven region was opened. The heroes of the 9 regions gathered to compete for the ancient relics. My sect's big brother Zhan Zai led a team of 7 people. I thought that the victory was in my grasp, but in the end, I was completely defeated by your sect's Zhu Shiyao. After thinking about it, I was shocked and even more puzzled. Therefore, I specifically wrote a letter to ask. Zhu Shiyao is so strong that she defies the natural order. Does your Lingjian school know about this before? Wang Lu was silent. After a while, Hai Yunfan's handwriting began to appear again. There is another question. Brother Wang is the lead disciple of Lingjian school, but, with Zhu Shiyao, how did you become the lead disciple? F***CK. Don't expose the truth. Although Wang Lu's psychological quality as a professional adventurer was already very strong, at this time, he also had the urge to tear the letter. He gritted his teeth, picked up the pen and replied, "Of course, it's because of my wisdom and beauty." Chapter 226. Zhu Shiyao was so powerful, so why should Wang Lu be the lead disciple? Hai Yunfan poked at the hemorrhoid, sore problem, so Wang Lu had no choice but to confess the truth. Of course,
It's because of my wisdom and beauty.
After writing, the other side of the letter was silent for a long time. The letter wrinkled a few times, as if it had been vigorously kneaded, and then stretched out.
On the surface, Hai Yunfan's neat handwriting reappeared.
Back to the main topic?
No one is stopping you from getting back to the main topic. I never encouraged you to talk about the lead disciple. Brother Wang really has a deep resentment, ha ha ha, but let's talk about the main topic. It's just that, before the main topic, we still need some background foreshadowing. Here's the thing. Hai Yunfan spared no expense to carry out a strictly confidential correspondence with Wang Lu. Of course, it was not to make fun of his lead disciple qualification. Next, Hai Yunfan briefly narrated the experience of the 7 of them exploring the Sword Tomb in the Southern Heaven region 1.5 months ago. Wang Lu was also quite interested in this. The news of the ancient Sword Tomb in the Southern Heaven region had spread throughout the 9 regions, and the heroes of the world had gathered. How did Zhu Shiyao stand out from the crowd? This experience would certainly give Wang Lu a lot of useful reference. At that time, there were more than 2,000 cultivators around the ancient Sword Tomb in the Southern Heaven region. Excluding some miscellaneous small sects that came to join in the fun and try their luck, there were hundreds of cultivators that were worth paying attention to. In addition to the elite disciples of the younger generation of the major sects, some of the old antiques were unwilling to be left out. This Sword Tomb may not be attractive to the Unity Stage cultivators, but at that time, there were 3 Deity Stage cultivators, as well as hundreds of Yuanying Stage and King Pill Stage cultivators, which was truly spectacular. However, for our 10,000 Arts sect, the old antiques are actually not that scary. They are too old and outdated. If it's a survival hunting situation, perhaps we are not their opponent, but in this kind of ancient site exploration, they have no advantage. The ones worth paying attention to were the elites of the younger generation. I presume that Brother Wang also knows that ever since the Great Change 20 years ago, heroes have appeared in large numbers on the continent. In addition to the 5 uniques, there are also some other sects that often have outstanding core disciples. These people have luck on their bodies, and their strength and intelligence are all first-rate in the world. They can often create miracles and trample on some of the older cultivators.
At that time, in front of the Sword Tomb in the Southern Heaven region, there were 30 or 40 such cultivators.
But to be honest, in our eyes, most of the so-called heroes are just the ones who are really worth paying attention to are the disciples of the 5 uniques. At that time, we received the news that, in addition to 10,000 Arts sect, the elite disciples of Spirit Sword sect and Kunlun sect also came to the Sword Tomb in the Southern Heaven region. Our martial brothers and sisters were gearing up for a fight, thinking that we could compete with Brother Wang and senior sister Lu Li. However, unexpectedly, we didn't see the shadow of Lingjian's school. Instead, we fought with senior sister Zhou Mumu and the others from Kunlun sect. Kunlun sect is indeed worthy to be the ancestral land of the immortal path. Senior sister Zhou's strength is outstanding, in no way inferior to senior sister Lu Li. However, big brother Zai fought with her 3 times, 2 wins and 1 loss, so he still had a small upper hand. Seeing this, Wang Lu couldn't help but say, "Do you have any shame? Zhou Mumu lost to Zhan Zai, yet you still have the nerve to evaluate her as the same level as Lu Li? Did you forget that a few years ago, Zhan Zai came to the mountain to challenge Lu Li and was beaten into a dog's head? On behalf of all the people in the world, I despise your 10,000 Arts sect." Ha ha ha, Brother Wang, you don't know. At that time, after senior brother Zai's closed-door training, his cultivation base broke through to shoot on stage. He thought that victory was already in his grasp, but unexpectedly, he was still no match for senior sister Lu Li's brilliant sword heart. At that time, when he returned to the mountain, his heart was like dead ashes. All day long, he kept saying that he was going to be alone for the rest of his life. However, unexpectedly, when he was disheartened, he actually saw through the barrier of love and achieved 10,000 motionless immortal heart, and his strength skyrocketed. According to the professional analysis of the 10,000 Arts sect, even if senior sister Lu Li has a low-level shoot-on-stage cultivation base, it would still be difficult for her to contend against senior brother Zai's 10,000 motionless immortal heart. Wang Lu was inexplicably astonished. Preposterous! How come I don't know that there are such benefits to being lovelorn? What? It's nothing, continue. Actually, Brother Wang, you don't have to worry about it. Each of us has our own immortal path, and the rhythm of our immortal cultivation is different. Some of us are faster at this time, some of us are faster at that time. Now, It just so happens that it's my 10,000 art sect's disciples' turn to cultivate a bit faster. In short, we have fought a few rounds with the people of Kunlun Immortal Sect, and gained a small advantage. However, when the gate of the sword tomb is opened, no one has the mind to fight with each other anymore. Every ancient sword tomb that can survive from the catastrophe of the Age of Chaos to the present day has a huge magical ability. Even the current leader of the immortal cultivation path, Hichu Daoren, would not dare to face it head-on. Therefore, when the sword tomb is opened, no matter how many contradictions there are, they have to temporarily put aside and go all out to enter the sword tomb. The first level of the sword tomb is the Sumeru Mustard Seed Space. When the gate of the sword tomb was opened, our original group of more than 2,000 people, in the blink of an eye, only 300 people were left. Those small fries who came to join in the fun were simply isolated outside. Later, I heard that they dug 3 feet into the ground, but they still couldn't find any clue of the sword tomb. The originally vast sword tomb seemed to have disappeared. Wang Lu pondered and wrote, "Disappeared? The main body of the sword tomb is not in the southern heaven region?" Later our analysis was like this. The southern heaven region is just the entrance to the sword tomb. The main body is in a space that is beyond our imagination. That space allows people to leave but not to enter. If you feel that it is difficult to survive, you can use your own spells to escape, but once you go out, you can never come back. However, at that time, when we just entered the first level, everyone was in high spirits and no one intended to give up. And the first level of the sword tomb was indeed not difficult. After we were teleported in, our hearts flashed a flash of understanding. We realized that as long as we find 3 golden grasses in a vast grassland, we will be teleported to the next level. Later, someone accidentally found the golden grasses and found that as long as they touched them, they would dissolve into the body and could not be preserved. Therefore, there is no space for us to compete with each other. And the sword tomb indeed does not encourage us to fight in this level. On the grassland, there are strange misty creatures. Once they find a fight, they will rush up and wrap around the person who started the fight. No matter how hard they struggle, they can't break free. After a while, they will disappear. Moreover, they are not teleported out of the sword tomb, but they will disappear without a trace. Most likely they are dead. Wang Lu sighed with emotion. Invisible killing. The haze is really terrible. Therefore, the most important thing in the first level is how to find the golden grasses. The grassland is vast and boundless, but looking for golden grasses is like looking for a needle in a haystack. Our group of hundreds of people searched the grassland for a whole day, but only a few people found a golden grasses, and without exception, all of them were young cultivators. Those deity-stage Taoist supremes have great magical abilities, but in the sword tomb, they couldn't display them. Instead, they were faintly repelled. One of them clearly saw a golden grass, but when he went forward to pick it, the color of the golden grass faded. Wang Lu commented, "They're probably afraid that the old man will cheat them." In short, according to our analysis, this level is a test of a cultivator's luck and affinity. And this is the advantage of young cultivators. Our luck is much better than that of the old man. In addition to this, it depends on other aspects of ability. On the grassland, we can't fight, so we can't display our fighting strength. However, our deduction technique and daily knowledge are not prohibited. We soon realize that if we don't have heaven-defying luck, we have to use our brains if we want to collect 3 golden grasses. And in this regard, our 10,000 art sect is undoubtedly the most advantageous. Under the leadership of eldest brother, the 7 of us launched our great divination technique. Starting from the previous location where we picked up the golden grasses, we analyzed the terrain, soil, air, and other factors to determine the location of the golden grasses. Although we can't do it very accurately, we can greatly reduce the search range. Other people like Senior Sister Zhou of Kunlun Immortal Sect also made a deduction, but their algorithm is obviously not as advanced as ours. Therefore, in 3 days, we were able to collect enough golden grasses for our group of 7 people, while their group of 6 people were still missing 1 golden grasses. It is said that none of the old Yuanying stage and above could find 3 golden grasses. Their primordial spirit is powerful, and their computing power is strong, but their algorithm is backward. Moreover, their adaptability is too poor, and they simply don't know how to adjust their calculation method. However, after entering the second level, we realized that the design of the first level is to a large extent a kind of protection. Without enough computing and adaptability, without enough luck, entering the second level is simply courting death. The second level is in a pitch-black space, where no matter what kind of spell we cast, we can't see anything. Moreover, we're surrounded by murderous spirit. There's a very vicious monster that, once you get within 30 feet of it, it will pounce on you and corrode you into a pool of pus. Moreover, it's very sensitive to primordial spirit. Once you're touched by the primordial spirit, it will endlessly chase you. In such a space, we have to find the key to the next level. We can only rely on our hearing, touch, smell, as well as our computing ability. The position and movement of the monster have a regular pattern. If we can calculate it in advance, we can pass through their encirclement. However, this also requires an extremely brilliant computing ability, as well as luck. Because there are illusions everywhere in this space, which greatly interferes with our information collection, it's impossible to pass this level by relying on our 10,000 art sect people alone. After several attempts, even Senior Sister Yi Feifei was almost killed. Later on, when Senior Sister Zhou Mumu and the others arrived, we put aside our previous grudges and began to cooperate, barely passing. And the third level is even more difficult. Fortunately, our two sects have joined forces, and our strength is not the same as before, so we stumbled through it.
After the third level, we finally arrived at the key point of this experiential learning, the hidden treasure of the sword tomb.
The result is really unexpected. Wang Lu could almost hear Hai Yunfan's helpless sigh. I thought the difficulty of the last level was the distribution of benefits with Kunlun Immortal Sect. However, in terms of strength, 10,000 Art Sect is a bit stronger, so I was still full of confidence. However, unexpectedly, when we opened the door of the hidden treasure, we saw your sect's senior sister Zhu Shiyao holding the ancient spiritual treasure sword, completing the last sacrificial refining. I can understand your mood. Hai Yunfan's sorrowful handwriting floated up, 20 years of childhood sweethearts, separated through the fire of war, parents making things difficult for them, and so on. After untold hardships, they finally came together, bowed to the heaven and earth, worshipped their parents, and entered the bridal chamber only to find that the bride was pressed down by a strange man on the bed. Can you really understand this kind of mood? Little Hai, your 10,000 motionless immortal heart should have reached the large success stage. Ha ha ha. My immortal heart is almost broken. Moreover, my immortal heart is not a cuckold. Ha ha. In short, what happened then? Then of course we were indignant, so we joined hands to subdue her and snatch the ancient sword, but unexpectedly, more than 10 of our two sects' elite people were actually defeated by her sword. Although at that time, everyone was exhausted, and only 3 to 5% of them were left, but it really made people speechless. Seeing this, Wang Lu sucked in a mouthful of cold air. One sword strike defeated more than 10 elites of the 5 uniques? This was really King against the heaven. Big senior sister, do you have to be so powerful? Little Hai, you specifically wrote to me to condemn Zhu Shiyao's despicable and shameless act of stealing the treasure? Hai Yunfan wrote, exploring the sword tomb depended on one's own ability and luck. We couldn't compete with her. Although we were not happy, we were willing to concede defeat. As disciples of the 5 uniques, we still have this little bit of tolerance. What I want to talk about is the next question. At that time, Zhu Shiyao defeated all of us and floated away. We rested for a moment, and when we were about to return, we found out that the ancient sword tomb was not only 3 layers, there was also a heavenly cave below. In fact, the size of the entire ancient sword tomb was much larger than we originally expected. What we saw at that time was the tip of the iceberg, which was enough to frighten people. I'm afraid that the high-rank ancient sword that Zhu Shiyao took away was only a trivial plaything in the sword tomb, and the big guy is still hidden deeper. This level of ancient ruins is rarely seen in the immortal cultivation world for many years. At present, 10,000 Art Sect and Kunlun Sect are strictly confidential. As for Lingjian School, since Zhu Shiyao can explore the 3rd layer, this matter can't be hidden from you. Not to mention, with the mysteriousness of the ancient sword tomb, none of us can handle it alone, so we can only join hands. Therefore, I wrote a letter in advance, inviting you to join us in exploring the deeper layer of the sword tomb. I know that your sect's elders will soon make a decision, but whether you want to participate or not, it's the action of your Lingjian school. On the premise that it doesn't violate the principle, I personally invite you. Brother Wang, let's join hands. Wang Lu pondered for a moment and then wrote, Little Hai, you are a good person. Chapter 227.
After understanding the whole story of Little Hai's adventure through the shadow letter, it was not difficult for Wang Lu to understand why he was so eager to write him this letter. The setting of the first 3 levels of the ancient sword tomb gave him an inexplicable sense of familiarity. He believed that Little Hai also experienced this feeling, so he immediately thought of him. I still remember Brother Wang's world-shaking one-wave pass task in the Peach Blossom Village 10 years ago, which is simply unprecedented. Presumably, Brother Wang has a unique talent for this kind of level design. In the ancient sword tomb, a cultivator's magical power and even their fighting ability are secondary, but the ability to break the level design is the most important. If I can get Brother Wang's help, I believe I will be successful in every endeavor. Little Hai was really a talkative person. Some words were very important, but he deliberately avoided saying them. Because there was simply no need to say it, Wang Lu would certainly think of it. Cooperation was a win-win situation. Wang Lu's ability to break the level was so powerful, so the 10,000 Art Sect would naturally get great benefits from the cooperation. But what about Wang Lu? What were the benefits of Wang Lu? Little Hai didn't say it because he knew that Wang Lu would definitely think of it. 5 years ago, the 10,000 Art Sect's visit to the Spirit Sword Mountain was indeed somewhat embarrassing. However, the strength of the 10,000 Art Sect would not be dim because of this. In terms of calculation ability alone, no cultivator in the world could be compared to the people of the 10,000 Art Sect. Previously, when the two sects exchanged information, Wang Lu's vision was also broadened. He repeatedly praised them as the Yellow Ridge people of the immortal cultivation world. And in the ever-changing situation of the ancient sword tomb, this kind of powerful calculation ability was necessary. In this world, there was no professional adventurer who could be successful in every endeavor. Wang Lu's one-wave pass task in the Peach Blossom Village was also based on a lot of calculation. Cooperating with the 10,000 Art Sect could save him a lot of energy. Moreover, according to Hai Yunfan, now that he had comprehended the 10,000 motionless immortal heart, his strength had skyrocketed to the extent that he could fight against Lu Li. He could be considered as a qualified teammate. Of course, no matter how Hai Yunfan praised Wang Lu and described the future of the cooperation between the two parties in an extravagant manner, it could not erase a simple fact. The risk of exploring the ancient sword tomb was extremely high. According to the previous description, the risk of every level in the ancient sword tomb increased. In the first level, the sword tomb even intentionally protected the intruders, but in the second level, it began to kill them. The third level was even more difficult, so if one was determined to explore deeper, although the benefits would be greater, they would also have to face greater risks. Was there a need for Wang Lu to take such a risk? With his natural endowment and background, there was absolutely no need for him to be impatient for success. If he cultivated honestly, his future would still be boundless. Moreover, he didn't have the hatred of killing his father or stealing his wife, so why bother? So when Hai Yunfan emphasized on Zhu Shiyao, he was actually providing an answer to this question. Of course it was necessary. Because a mountain cannot contain two tigers. You Wang Lu, the dignified lead disciple of Spirit Sword Sect, how do you compare with Zhu Shiyao? With her around, how much of your reputation as the chief disciple will remain? So if you want to maintain your dignity, what should you do? No matter how much controversy there was about Wang Lu, based on Hai Yunfan's understanding of Wang Lu, from a big point of view, he was an upright and candid person. In the face of this kind of situation, he certainly wouldn't suppress his opponent, but rather make himself stronger. On the immortal cultivation path, the most taboo was to be impatient for success. However, if one really wanted to advance by leaps and bounds, there was still a way to find the immortal fate. What was the immortal fate? The Ripple Dream in the Green Lake of Grand Cloud Mountain was an excellent immortal fate. And in the ancient sword tomb, of course, it also contained the immortal fate. If Wang Lu wanted to overwhelm Zhu Shiyao, step-by-step immortal cultivation was absolutely not enough. This is very good. But are you the one who has the final say? Wang Lu had his own plan, but the issue that needed to be confirmed must be confirmed in writing. Rest assured, if there is no elder's approval, how could I dare to make my own decision? This is the seal. A complex pattern appeared on the shadow letter paper. Wang Lu looked at it and tentatively approved it. Then, when the official document from 10,000 Art Sect arrives, after our Heavenly Sword Hall has made a decision, if there is no problem, we can start the cooperation. I wish you a happy cooperation. When Wang Lu finished writing the last word, all the handwriting on the shadow letter paper disappeared, and the magical power on the paper dried up, turning it into an ordinary letter paper. The correspondence with Hai Yunfan could only reach a preliminary cooperation intention, and the detailed content had to be discussed at an opportune time. After all, such a big matter couldn't be ignored. After Wang Lu put down the shadow letter paper, his heart gradually stirred. He thought that after coming back from the Grand Cloud Mountain, he could settle down for 1 or 2 years, but he probably couldn't rest for that long. Whether it was the pressure from Zhu Shiyao or the great era that his master said, it made Wang Lu's heart eager to give it a try. Ancient sword tomb? I hope it won't disappoint me. Far away in the eastern border region, on a stone platform surrounded by gentle breeze and gentle water, Hai Yunfan gently put down his pen, stretched out his hand, and pulled out the magical power from the shadow letter paper, thus destroying this expensive prop. Then, a questioning voice came from behind him. What's the reply from Wang Lu? Hai Yunfan said with a smile. It's done, he agreed. Turning his head, he saw the eldest brother of 10,000 Arts sect, Zhan Zai, gently standing in a clear pool. His toes set off ripples on the surface of the pool. Upon hearing Hai Yunfan's answer, Zhan Zai was slightly surprised. That's straightforward. Hai Yunfan shrugged. It seems that the pressure from Zhu Shiyao is not small. When it came to Zhu Shiyao, not only Wang Lu was under a lot of pressure, Zhan Zai's figure also sank a bit, and the clear pool rippled. Damn it, what the hell is wrong with that abnormal monster? Thinking of the sword technique that was broken by her in the ancient sword tomb, Zhan Zai could not help but feel a chill from the bottom of his heart. If she was present during the last sect exchange, we wouldn't have been able to do anything. Thinking of that fiasco that happened in a flash, Hai Yunfan couldn't help but sigh. I hope that this exploration of the ancient sword tomb can have a good enough harvest. However, with Zhu Shiyao's strong sword sense, the Lingjian school will certainly send her to explore. Even if we add Wang Lu, we may not. How could there be a reason to be afraid before the fight? Well, since Wang Lu has agreed, let's go back to the sect leader. With that, Zhan Zai stretched out his hand to summon a thunderbolt, which then wrapped him in Hai Yunfan. With a flash of lightning, they had already left the place where Hai Yunfan cultivated at the Gentle Breeze waterfall. The 10,000 Arts sect was not a lone peak like the Spirit Sword Mountain. Instead, it occupied an extremely vast area, with mountains, rivers, jungles and hills, and its interior was divided into many blocks. Zhan Zai took Hai Yunfan across a rushing river, across a misty lake, and then stopped at a plain. They then flew straight up, breaking through the clouds. Above the clouds, there was a huge wheel that blotted out the sky, as if it was the ruler of the sky, overlooking the earth. In the middle of the wheel, a young cultivator sat cross-legged. In his hand, there was a quaint bamboo brush that absorbed the starry night sky, which was like a thick ink. He wrote in the void without stopping. Every time the tip of the brush danced, it would trigger a mysterious force, which left a corresponding mark on the wheel behind the cultivator. After Zhan Zai and Hai Yunfan pierced through the clouds, they converged the lightning and entered through an entrance at the edge of the wheel. Then, they respectfully walked on the side road that supported the outline of the wheel. The feeling under their feet was neither metal nor wood. Every time they took a step, it would trigger a burst of light, which reflected a piece of writing. Along the way, the two of them had left a long trail of light behind them. However, the cultivator that was far away in the horizon never came close, which inevitably made people wonder whether this huge wheel was boundless or not. However, the two of them were already familiar with this process, so they were not impatient and just patiently moved forward. Before long, the scene in front of them changed, and the cultivator that was far away in the horizon suddenly appeared in front of them. At this time, when they took the last step, the words under their feet just happened to form an article. Zhan Zai and Hai Yunfan, as if by prior agreement, bowed in salute. Greetings, sect leader. The young cultivator sitting on the cloud treasure wheel was the famous sect leader of 10,000 Arts sect in 9 regions, Supreme Tian Luan. Supreme Tian Luan had been cultivating for more than 1,700 years, and now his cultivation base had reached the peak of Unity stage, only a few steps away from the Deshang stage. He was one of the top 5 peerless powerhouses in the Wanxian League, a senior who was admired and respected by countless people. It was just that few people knew that the real body of Supreme Tian Luan looked like a young man in his 20s or 30s, which contained an amazing vitality and did not seem to decay in the slightest. As Supreme Tian Luan himself said, knowledge would never decay. Seeing Zhan Zai and Hai Yunfan,
Supreme Tianluan didn't stop writing, nor did he move his head. He just lightly said, I see. Since he intends to cooperate, then that's the best. You two go find junior brother Tsang Wu to prepare the official document. When everything is ready, you can leave. Zhan Zai and Hai Yunfan responded in unison. As for your question, Zai, my opinion is to treat each other with sincerity. 10,000 Arts sect has pride, and foolish people are not qualified to walk with us. However, since you have personally experienced and recognized the Lingjian school 5 years ago, then treat each other with sincerity. Those who seek knowledge should be open-minded, so don't worry too much. Yes. The second question is, this exploration will not have the help of your seniors. I don't care what the other sects do. There will not be a Taoist master of 10,000 Arts sect. It's not that I'm arrogant, but it's not necessary. Through the first 3 tests, this sword tomb is most likely the tomb of inheritance from the ancient times, which was born in response to the change in the providence of heaven and earth. Before the arrival of the Great Era, it supported the predestined people and left its own inheritance, not for the greedy. In simple terms, if you want to get the real treasure in the sword tomb, there are roughly 4 requirements. Young age, solid foundation, strong plasticity, and predestined people. Specifically, under 40 years old, shoot on stage or above, high-grade spirit root, and unsolidified primordial spirit. Also, recognize the idea of the master of the sword tomb, and be recognized by the master of the sword tomb. The last point is difficult to grasp, but the first few are very standard conditions. At present, only cultivators below the Taoist master of 10,000 Arts sect can meet these conditions, so there's no need to waste manpower. Although you guys haven't cultivated for a long time, and your cultivation is not high, it's time for you to take charge. If you can't do anything without the help of your seniors, then you're not worthy to be a disciple of my 10,000 Arts sect. When you encounter difficulties, use your brain more, and remember that knowledge is power. Zhan Zai looked very serious. Yes. The third question is about your doubt, Yunfan. My answer is that it doesn't matter, even if you fail. On the contrary, protecting yourself is more important than anything else. The 9 regions is big, and Dixian is everywhere. Not to mention, before the world changes, you guys have the capital to fail. Moreover, experiencing 1 or 2 failures is a good thing for you. Didn't Zai cultivate the 10,000 motionless immortal heart because of this? I know that many people in the 10,000 Arts sect think that my idea is too conservative, or even too cowardly. Indeed, as the sect leader of the 10,000 Arts sect, I don't have the spirit that a person of the 10,000 Arts sect should have. Compared to the brilliant geniuses in the 10,000 Arts sect, I'm just a scholar with a librarian background. However, after 1,000 years, those brilliant people have died, but I have survived. Speaking to this, Supreme Tianluan slightly stopped writing and smiled. Of course, whether you want to shine or live a long life, the choice is in your hands. Chapter 228. On the stellar peak of Spirit Sword Mountain in Blue River region, the sect leader of Spirit Sword sect, Feng Yin Taoist master, and his disciple, Xueqi, sat opposite each other in the bamboo room. 2 cups of tea were placed between the 2 of them. The water vapor in the cup slowly rose, which set off the tranquil and comfortable atmosphere in the bamboo room, if one did not consider the row of heavenly sword hall elders who were standing in the bamboo room. After a long time, Feng Yin, who was somewhat uncomfortable being stared at by his junior brother and sister, finally opened his mouth to break the silence. Tell us in detail about your experiential learning in the Southern Heaven region. Okay. Xueqi, who has never been good at talking, calmly agreed. Then the woman suddenly stood up and made a sword move. Her movement was as smooth as flowing water. The bamboo room suddenly lit up with starry light. Countless sharp sword chi stabbed toward the sect leader. The sharp sword intent seemed like it wanted to cut him into pieces. However, how could a deity stage cultivator be easily hurt by it? The starry sword chi hit the sect leader's body, bursting out dazzling sparks. However, it couldn't even hurt the sect leader's clothes and skin. The sect leader's expression remained unchanged. He picked up the teacup and slightly nodded. So that's how it is. It's indeed an unexpected result. With that, Feng Yin fell into contemplation. As for Xueqi, she took a deep breath and then calmly sat back, picked up the teacup and gently sipped the tea. The bamboo room was restored to its tranquility. After a long time. What the hell? You two can speak human language. Standing on the side, the fifth elder finally could not bear it anymore. She took a few steps forward and slapped the wooden table. Are you showing off your foreign language skills? Feng Yin Taoist master was startled, and then apologetically said, I forgot that you don't understand sword language. For Feng Yin and Zhu Shiyao, the most convenient way to communicate was with the sword. There were thousands of words in the heart, but they didn't need to resort to the mouth. When the sword was swung, all the thoughts were poured into it. It could be said that it was convenient and fast. Moreover, it was also in line with the identity of a sword cultivator. However, to be able to communicate through the sword intent, one must have a sharp enough sword sense, which meant that one's talent in the way of the sword must be at the peak. And among the Heavenly Sword Hall elders, not everyone could meet this condition. In that case, let me briefly explain Yao Er's experience and my own analysis. Feng Yin Taoist master put down the teacup and pondered for a moment. Yao Er's experience was very simple. While the others entered the sword catacomb through the main entrance and fought their way through, Yao Er found a small path and directly entered the treasure room to retrieve the ancient sword. Then, she swaggered off. What kind of godly development is this? The fifth elder was simply inexplicably shocked. After going through the war, separation, parents making things difficult for you, and other hardships, you finally got married to your childhood sweetheart of 20 years, only to find out that she was pregnant with someone else's child when you entered the bridal chamber? If you must use this kind of vulgar explanation, then it's like this. Feng Yin didn't know whether to laugh or cry. He then shook his head and said, therefore, the 10,000 Arts sect and Kunlun sect allied forces that went through untold hardships to break into the treasure room tried to intercept Yao Er in a flustered and exasperated manner. Unfortunately, Yao Er had just finished refining the ancient sword, and her sword momentum was at its peak. Although they had a large number of people, they were already exhausted after passing through 3 levels. Moreover, the fire in their heart was too exuberant, so they lost their calm state of mind. Under Yao Er's sword, they were full of flaws. Not being able to catch the adulterer, they were beaten instead, really inhumane. The fifth elder gloated. The youngest among them, Hua Yun, asked, will there be any trouble? After all, they have suffered a big loss. Feng Yin said, the exploration of the sword catacomb depends on one's own chance. Yao Er didn't use any despicable tricks, it can only be said that everyone has their own chance. The sword catacomb in the southern heaven region is the tomb of inheritance from ancient times. This time, it came into being because it sensed the change in the world's providence and resuscitation from the void to find a suitable successor. This kind of inheritance tomb usually has 2 kinds of methods, similar to our immortal cultivation sect's disciple recruitment. The first kind is to meet the rigid standards, age, plasticity, cultivation philosophy. That is, to pass through many tests. As long as one can pass the test, they can take the corresponding treasure. The second kind is to have a predestined relationship with the treasure in the tomb and get the direct recognition of the treasure. This way they can skip all the tests and directly take the treasure. The first kind is actually a necessary supplement to the second kind. If the sword catacomb can't find a particularly suitable object that can directly pass the inheritance, the regular test will be opened and the participants will pass through the test. Feng He said, is this the difference between the immortal gathering and the elder's legacy? Wang Wu said with a smile, that is to say, if you can't find a suitable person in free love, then you have to obediently go on a blind date. In short, the reason why Yao Er can go straight in, avoid all the tests and directly take the ancient sword, is because the ancient sword spirit thinks that Yao Er is a predestined person, so it opened the back door of the sword catacomb for her. Otherwise, no matter how good Yao Er's stellar sword scripture is, it is impossible to violate the rules of the sword catacomb. Lu Xian was quite pleased and nodded to Zhu Shiyao, so that's how it is. I really congratulate Yao Er for obtaining this immortal fate. Lu Li frowned, senior brother. There is a problem here. If Yao Er and the ancient sword are predestined, then why did the sword catacomb open the normal test procedure and let other cultivators enter the tomb? The other elders were taken aback. Feng Yin's face also sank and said seriously, this is the problem I want to talk about next. The size of the sword catacomb is much larger than expected. This is an unprecedented ancient ruin, which is probably left by a true immortal before the age of chaos. The ancient sword that Yao Er took is only the outer treasure, which is not worth mentioning compared to the core treasure in the deeper part. So even if Yao Er takes the ancient sword, it will not affect the normal operation of the sword catacomb.
The Heavenly Sword Hall elders were extremely shocked. Lu Xian's voice trembled as he said in disbelief, "The inheritance of a true immortal? In this era, there is still the inheritance of a true immortal? Don't tell me the age of chaos didn't make them all disappear? This is a big academic discovery." The fifth elder scolded, "Academic my ass. This is money." Lu Li also rarely nodded in agreement with the fifth sister's point of view. Yes, if the top-rank spiritual treasure is only the outer treasure, then most likely it is the inheritance of a true immortal. There must be an immortal weapon inside, most likely a true immortal weapon. It's not an exaggeration to say that it's priceless. Moreover, it's in Shangjing Immortal City. The value of such a sword catacomb is comparable to that of one of the 5 uniques of the Wanxian League. But senior brother, is this news true? Feng Yin said, when Yao Er communicated with the ancient sword spirit, at least the deeper existence has been confirmed. Unfortunately, the sword spirit has been sleeping for nearly 10,000 years, so she has lost too much of her memory. Moreover, she was sealed not long after she was born, so she knows very little. Otherwise, with the ancient sword in Yao Er's hand, our Lingzhen school has an incomparable advantage. Wang Wu sneered. But other people may not know this. I'm afraid at this time, Kunlun Immortal Sect and 10,000 Art Sect are gnashing their teeth in envy and jealousy. Feng Yin disagreed. This kind of sword catacomb, even Shangjing Sect alone can't handle it. Several sects cooperating is inevitable. Moreover, once we gain something from the sword catacomb, our information advantage will be wiped out. Therefore, there's no need to have such a strong hostility. I estimate that it won't be long before the documents from 10,000 Art Sect and Kunlun Immortal Sect arrive. At that time, we need to take it seriously. The several elders had their own ideas, but this kind of big matter was naturally decided by the sect leader. Senior brother, what are you going to do? Feng Yin said, there are 2 sets of plans. The first is to use the entire sect to develop the sword catacomb. The rule of the sword catacomb is to find young, malleable cultivators to inherit the legacy. In ancient times, the surrounding spiritual energy is rich, so the heart standard is much higher than now. In Lingzhen school, I'm afraid only Yao Er, Wang Lu, and Lu Li, these few people are qualified to participate. Therefore, the 3 of them naturally have to take action. Other suitable candidates can also participate. At the same time, us old guys can't just sit around. Although the sword catacomb won't let us in, we can support Yao Er and the others from outside the sword catacomb in all aspects. As a last resort, we can even break the sword catacomb. The advantage of this plan is that the risk is relatively small. Regardless of the rules of the sword catacomb, it is, after all, a dead thing from 10,000 years ago. With the cooperation of the 3 sects elders, the risk is always lower than letting Yao Er and the other disciples explore on their own. However, the problem is, once the elders make their move, this matter will inevitably shock the world, and there will no longer be any possibility of keeping it a secret. When the time comes, once the Shangjing sect is alarmed, I believe the other 2 sects don't want to see Shangjing sect being the only one. Therefore, the development of the matter is more likely to be the second plan. Feng Yin paused, swept his eyes around, and then said with a sinking voice, fully trust our successor disciples and let them act alone. We, the old guys, will never participate. At the same time, we will also not allow any other old guys from the other sects to intervene. As long as our 3 sects insist that this is the cultivation of the younger generation disciples, even Shangjing sect would not be able to intervene. In this way, no matter how much the harvest is, it will be divided equally among the 3 sections. I believe Kunlun Immortal Sect and 10,000 Art Sect would also be inclined to this plan. Hua Yun was somewhat worried. Wouldn't it be too risky if it's just the few of them? After all, this is the sword catacomb from 10,000 years ago, and it has also experienced the age of chaos. Even if the intention of the predecessors is to select the successor, they won't kill them. However, in case there's a change in the array inside, their cultivation base is, after all, too low. Feng Yin said, therefore we can also have the third plan. We can pretend that this thing never happened. Hua Yun was suddenly at a loss for words. Among the present elders, only Hua Yun hasn't really experienced the tragedy of 100 years ago. Therefore, she was also the soft-hearted one. No matter what the other elders thought, they never thought of giving up this opportunity. Even if behind this opportunity was a huge crisis. If it was other disciples, then it would be fine. However, since they were the successor disciples, carrying the legacy and future of the Lingjian school, and even shouldering the mission of being the mainstay of the Great Era, they were doomed to not grow up in the gentle breeze and drizzle. The ancient sword catacomb was indeed full of crises, but compared to the growth process of the Heavenly Sword Hall elders, what were these tribulations? Not to mention that the sword catacomb was full of opportunities. Not to mention, the Lingjian school had Wang Lu, this big killer weapon. Chapter 229. In fact, in addition to Hua Yun's doubts, when the elders of Heavenly Sword Hall learned that the ancient sword tomb was the inheritance of a true immortal, they basically established the general direction. As the sect leader, Feng Yin had the power to make a decision. It was just that usually he almost never used it. He always discussed with his junior brothers and sisters before making a decision. However, when Feng Yin already had his own idea, the other elders rarely expressed their objection. It was not that they were afraid of authority. The deep affection between the 10 elders of Heavenly Sword Hall was far beyond the imagination of ordinary cultivators. Power and interest were meaningless to them. The other elders supported Feng Yin because, as the great elder and the sect leader, he had the vision and wisdom to protect the sect for more than 100 years. After a moment of silence, the reward giver elder, whose status was second only to the sect leader, saw that there was no problem, so he further set the tone. Then let's go with the second plan. Let Yao Er and the others take this opportunity to exercise, and also see what level the elite disciples of Kunlun sect and 10,000 Art sect are. I heard that the lead disciple of 10,000 Art sect, Zhan Zai, has successfully comprehended the 10,000 motionless immortal heart, and his strength has surpassed Lu Li Zhou Mumu of Kunlun sect is similar to him. They are all formidable opponents that the next generation disciples can't underestimate. Zhou Ming also sighed with emotion. I originally thought that little Lu Li, who accompanied Wang Lu to experience the immortal fate in Cloud Region, would be ahead of her peers in cultivation base. Unexpectedly, she just barely caught up with the progress of others. This generation is really amazing. Lu Xian said, luck is not something that can be envied, and Lingjian School's advantage can only be reflected after reaching the Taoist master stage. In short, this time, the 3 sects will jointly explore the ancient sword tomb. Presumably, they will go all out. There will be cooperation and competition between them. Compared to Kunlun sect and 10,000 Art sect, although Yao Er and Wang Lu each have their own strengths, they are, after all, weak. At the current stage of immortal cultivation, we can only send out 3 successor disciples and a few other people. However, Kunlun sect and 10,000 Art sect should have no problem forming a team of 10 people. Therefore, in these few days, us old guys shouldn't be idle. Whatever means and treasures we have, we should use them. No matter which peak they are from, they are all successor disciples of Spirit Sword sect, so there's nothing to hide. Wang Wu strongly supported this. Well said. Strong support. Recently, Wang Lu has been cultivating the great art of shapeless metal dissipation. He needs 100,000 spirit stones every day to make any progress. I sincerely ask for your support. The sect leader said softly, such an evil cultivation method, just tell him not to cultivate it. Hey, aren't you going to give your full support? Yeah. Feng Yin coldly said, therefore, we are also considering whether we should change him to a more reliable master. In any case, his non-phase method has already reached a certain level, so he can continue to practice without you. F***CK, you guys can't abandon me like this. After eliminating the interference of the 5th elder, the rest of the elders of the Heavenly Sword Hall decided on the scope of their contributions. Some contributed their unique magical treasures, some contributed their elixirs, and some were willing to pass on their skills to their disciples so that their cultivation could temporarily increase. In the end, even Wang Wu solemnly declared that she would teach Wang Lu a new set of cultivation techniques. Although it was a benefit for their own disciple, the rest of the elders had no objection. In fact, the biggest task given to Wang Wu by the Lingjian school was to train Wang Lu well. At the end of the discussion, Lu Xian said, the preliminary preparation work has been set. The next step is to draw up a preliminary plan of action. Although the specific details have to wait until we communicate with Kunlun sect and 10,000 Art sect, we still need to have a basic idea. I mean, we should let Wang Lu lead the team. Although in terms of strength, Yao Er is obviously above him, and little Lu Li can also make great progress after a short period of training, but in the process of exploring the sword tomb, Wang Lu's strategic ability is undoubtedly the most important. Feng He questioned, that's true.
After the experiential learning in the Grand Cloud Mountain, I also recognize his talent as a team leader. But now, only little Lu Li is convinced by him. He and Yao Er haven't established enough trust. Several elders turned to look at Zhu Shiyao. The woman looked indifferent, still sitting at the wooden table in the bamboo room. Her slender hands stroked the sword, and her eyes were like stars. The elders felt a bit of a headache. Zhu Shiyao's temperament was too cold, and even too arrogant. In addition to the way of the sword, she didn't care about anything else. If one wanted to get her approval, they had to prove their strength and talent. And in the entire Spirit Sword Mountain, only the sect leader Feng Yin could use his peerless sword to suppress her. If it were other people such as Lu Xian and Feng He, although they were also the most authoritative elders, and their cultivation base was far above the current Zhu Shiyao, it was impossible for them to casually instruct Zhu Shiyao to do the work that she hated. As for Wang Lu, previously, when Zhu Shiyao returned to the mountain and used her extreme divergent sword language to frighten the disciples of Spirit Sword Mountain, Wang Lu also found it difficult to resist and had to take half a step back, which made it impossible for Zhu Shiyao to be convinced. After a moment of silence, Wang Wu sneered, "You bunch of idiots, your brains are really rigid and rotten. Isn't it easy to be disobedient? No matter how indifferent Zhu Shiyao is, she's still a woman. If a woman is disobedient, then F***ck her until she is obedient. No matter how tough a woman is, the man who enters her body will be particularly weak." Inside the bamboo room, there was a deathly silence. The temperature even plummeted, and a thin layer of frost and cold mist rose. Wang Wu, however, seemed to be unaware of it as she continued, "In the next few days, I will design a set of non-phase diamond pestle for Wang Lu. I guarantee that after he practices it, he will become twice as powerful and unyielding, bringing the hard characteristic of the non-phase method to the extreme, making Zhu Shiyao obedient and obedient." The sect leader softly opened his mouth. His voice trembled, no, his whole body was gently trembling. Wang Wu said with a smile, "Rest assured, senior brother, when the method is perfected, I will also teach you to practice it. I guarantee that you will be like an old tree blooming, like the setting sun falling red." "You shut your mouth. These filthy words are simply unimaginable. From today on, for the next 3 years, you will no longer have any offerings." Wang Wu, as if struck by a bolt from the blue, was flabbergasted. "Why?" Then she quickly turned around to ask for help. "Brothers, help me." Even Hua Yun, who had a good relationship with her, couldn't stand it anymore. "Senior sister, you are short of money recently. Every time you are short of money, you lose your moral integrity." Lu Li also sighed. "Senior sister, I still have some spirit stones. I'll give them to you. You'd better be a little more reserved." Amidst the quarrel, Zhu Shiyao suddenly stood up. As soon as the woman stood up, the rest of the elders shut their mouths and turned their attention to her. After Zhu Shiyao got up, her willowy eyebrows slightly wrinkled and her cherry lips opened and closed, as if there was something stuck in her throat. She was not good with words. Although she had an idea in her heart, it was difficult for her to say it out loud. Therefore, she resorted to the sword. She casually waved the top-grade spiritual treasure ancient sword from the ancient sword tomb, which turned into a mass of starry sword chi that diffused in all directions. Everyone present could feel Zhu Shiyao's firm will from this bitingly cold sword intent, and for a while, they were silent. Zhu Shiyao had made up her mind. As soon as she waved her sword, she floated away, leaving the bamboo room cold and lonely. What did Yao Er say just now?" Wang Wu was puzzled and had to ask for help from others. Several elders looked embarrassed. In the end, Feng He coldly snorted. "She said that she will never team up with Wang Lu, let alone listen to his instructions. In the ancient sword tomb, she wants to go alone." Wang Wu was dumbfounded. This at such a young age, she is determined to be a leftover woman. Why bother? "You have the F***king face to ask?" After a long silence, the sect leader finally spoke. "Actually, this is also good. Yao Er is proud and arrogant, so she wants to knead her into Wang Lu's team. Not only will it be difficult for the two of them to cooperate tacitly, but it will also cause internal friction for no reason. Moreover, strictly speaking, Yao Er has been under my tutelage for nearly 20 years, and Wang Lu has also been on the mountain for more than 10 years. I think we might as well take a look at the so-called chosen one in the stellar diffraction technique or the reincarnated sword god that I personally selected,
Which side is stronger?
It's good for the disciples of the Lingjian school to get along with each other, but we also need to strengthen the internal competition, especially for Wang Lu. He has talent, and his cultivation progress is also quite good. However, compared to Yao his motivation to cultivate is still lacking, so we might as well give him more pressure. As for Yao she has the ancient sword to protect her, so she can protect herself by herself.
With that, the sect leader seemingly unintentionally glanced at his junior sister.
Sure enough, he saw that she looked relaxed, with a heartless and joyous look. You, this guy, are you addicted to playing the bad guy? The documents from 10,000 Art Sect and Kunlun Sect were sent to Spirit Sword Mountain a day later. As expected by Feng Yin, the two sects put forward a strict confidentiality proposal to let their disciples act alone. Obviously, they didn't want this matter to be made public, lest a long night brings many dreams. The southern heaven region was too remote for the three sects, beyond their reach.
Of course, with the strength of the 5 uniques of the Wanxian League, if they had to fight across the region, the local sects such as Beastmaster School and the others in the southern heaven region would still not be able to resist.
The problem was, with the continent-wide strategy of Shangjing sect, the situation had become delicate. As the head of the 5 uniques, Shangjing sect's comprehensive strength could almost be seen as the sum of the other 3 sections. Although this behemoth was bloated, if it really wanted to oppress others, only the dead barbarians of the Royal Soldier sect could go head-on against it. Therefore, the best way was to bypass Shangjing sect, which required a high degree of secrecy. The news about the Lingjian school was limited to the Heavenly Sword Hall elders, Xueqi and Wang Lu, the 2 successor disciples. Even Lu Li was temporarily concealed. Only the sect leader, several elders, and several elite disciples of Kunlun sect and 10,000 Arts sect knew about it. Things might not necessarily be kept secret until the last moment, but a little bit more was a little bit more. As for the method of cooperation between the 3 sects, after 1 or 2 rounds of rapid and efficient negotiation, a tentative framework was set. The disciples of the 3 sects must take the big heart demon oath to bind each other not to harm each other. As for how to team up after entering the sword tomb, there was no clear requirement. After all, the situation in the deeper part of the sword tomb was still unknown, so it was meaningless to set too much detail. In order to show their sincerity, each of the 3 sects came up with a number of valuable spiritual objects, most of which were used to crack the mechanism in the sword tomb, or to save their lives. Among them, the 10,000 Art sect contributed a very unique universal calculation formula, which could be used to quickly calculate the response method in the mechanism array. Kunlun sect contributed a set of ancient books, which recorded the various experiences of the predecessors in exploring the remains of true immortals, all of which were priceless. For this reason, the Lingjian school had quite a headache on how to come up with something of similar value.
While the elders of the 3 sects were actively planning for the development of the sword tomb, Wang Lu was not idle.
The biggest difficulty in this trip to the sword tomb was the heavy test left by the true immortals.
And in the Spirit Sword Mountain, there was an expert who could crack no matter how complicated the mechanism was.
Lady Boss, I want to take out. Chapter 230. Wang Lu had always prided himself as a professional adventurer, and one of the main business of a professional adventurer was to solve all kinds of puzzles. The ancient sword tomb trial was naturally within the scope of his business. Just listening to Hai Xiaohai's experience in the sword tomb, Wang Lu felt that the 2 teams of 10,000 Art sect and Kunlun Immortal sect were simply innumerable. Even if he was alone, he could do better than their team. But on the other hand, professional adventurers were not omnipotent. If he relied on himself, perhaps it would be difficult to continue until the 3rd level, and he still needed help to continue. Compared to Xueqi, who easily walked into the treasure room alone, Wang Lu also admitted that at least in terms of the first 3 levels, he was not the best.
Moreover, apart from Xueqi, he dared not say that he was the number 1 in the Spirit Sword Mountain sect in terms of strategy.
The lady boss of the Rue family inn in Spirit Creek Town was the real expert. No matter how big the mechanism array was, under the touch of her slender jade-like hands, it would disintegrate into nothingness.
Plus, although she looked petite and exquisite, in fact, her iron fist was like a hammer, and her strength was as great as an ox.
As long as she pushed all the way, there was no obstacle that she could not pass. Therefore, when it came to the in-depth development of the ancient sword tomb, the first person that came to Wang Lu's mind was the lady boss. Lady boss, I want to take out.
Pushing open the door of the inn, He saw the lady boss behind the counter was somewhat restlessly tapping her abacus in front of a blank account book. The calculation process was probably 0 plus 0 equals 0. Seeing Wang Lu came in, the lady boss put down her abacus, raised her eyelids, and said, "Why don't you hurry to prepare for the experiential learning in the Southern Heaven region?
Why are you wasting your time here? Why do you want takeout?"
Wang Lu said with a sinking voice, "I want a pair of white-cut pig's trotters that can break all kinds of methods." The lady boss picked up the wine jar and smashed it. "Don't be so grumpy. I'm very sincere in asking for help." The lady boss glanced at him. "I told you my ability is only the most effective in the Spirit Sword Mountain, and the furthest I can go is the Blue River region. I can't do anything in the Southern Heaven region." Wang Lu explained, "The main body of the Sword Tomb is not in the Southern Heaven region. The Southern Heaven region is just an entrance that was accidentally discovered. It exists in an unknown space where the Sword Tomb and 9 regions meet." The lady boss said, "My main body isn't in the Tiannan, but it's not in the Blue River region either. Once I cross the boundary, I won't be able to display my abilities. But if that thing escapes, can you bear the responsibility?" Wang Lu said, "That's why I don't dare to hope that you'll personally accompany me, Sister Ling.
However, do you have any way to make your ability portable?
For example, is it possible for your undergarments to inherit the effects of your ability? Pervert, die." Wait, Sister Ling, this is based on academic research. Jokes aside, when Wang Lu saw Feng Ling's attitude, he knew that his dreams had been shattered. There were no shortcuts to the development of Tiannan's Sword Tomb. Of course, he should have thought that if Feng Ling was so useful, even if the sect leader had to kneel and lick her boots, he would still use her power. He just considered that their relationship was bad, and perhaps Feng Ling was deliberately standing by, but now it seemed that this was not the case.
However, he was just trying his luck. Sister Ling's undergarments.
No, he couldn't get a portable item to break through the barrier, so it would be good to have a portion of sliced pig's trotters as a sumptuous meal. However, just when Wang Lu gave up, the lady boss slightly hesitated and said, "This time, the exploration of the ancient sword tomb is very risky. I see that there are quite a lot of disputes among the Heavenly Sword Hall elders, so don't be too careless. I have a treasure here, which was given to me by old man Feng. It can save my life at a critical moment. I think you might be able to use it." With that, the lady boss took out an orange jade tablet from her bosom and directly stuffed it into Wang Lu's hand. "When you need it, just crush it. Unless it's a life and death situation, don't use it carelessly. If you don't have any use for it, that's for the best. Remember to return it to me when you come back." Wang Lu only felt a warmth in his hand, and the jade tablet that had the warmth of a young girl fell into his hand without any hesitation. Without waiting for him to speak, the lady boss turned around and went to the kitchen. Since her signal to send him off was so obvious, even though Wang Lu was a little puzzled, he still left the Ru family in. However, as he held the jade tablet given by the lady boss, a question involuntarily appeared in his mind. Because of Feng Ling's constitution, she rarely touched any spiritual objects, because it was very likely that she would destroy the treasure with just a light touch. During the immortal gathering, when she gave him the fresh-keeping food container, she had placed a handkerchief on it. But now, she directly took off the jade tablet. Was she not afraid of damaging the spiritual object? Wang Lu observed it curiously. The spiritual energy in the jade tablet was restrained, and it was sealed with a unique method. Unless he really crushed it, he would not be able to determine its specific effects. After saying goodbye to the Ru family inn, his second stop was Misty Peak's cafeteria.
"Oh, Wang Lu, it's you. I heard that you're going to a very dangerous place to train?" "That's right.
A qualified swordsman should continuously challenge themselves in dangerous situations and sharpen their swords."
"Wait a moment. I have something for you."
While speaking, Aya did not allow him to say anything else.
She quickly took out a large package.
"This is the military rations I specially prepared for you. It's a special product of Blue Sky Peak, so it's very nutritious." Wang Lu was silent for a while, but he accepted it for the time being. He thought that when he needed to use poison, he would at least have the raw materials. After giving away her sincerity, Aya felt carefree. "Then, is there anything else?" Wang Lu said. "I want to spar with you with the sword again. It has indeed been a long time since we've sparred with the sword. You've grown a lot during this period of time, so let me see your new skills." As he spoke, his dark green eyes shone with an aggressive light.
In the last sparring session with Aya, as expected, he was once again defeated. Similarly, as expected, he had a new understanding. This chef of the Misty Peak could be said to be one of the most mysterious people in Spirit Sword Mountain. Seemingly without the least bit of a mortal method, she was just a mortal with good swordsmanship. However, with his current shoot-on-stage strength, Wang Lu still could not win against her. Aya's swordsmanship was like a never-ending towering peak. The stronger she was, the stronger she became, making it impossible for people to guess where her limit was. However, the reason why Wang Lu sparred with her was not to win, but to sharpen his sword edge. Sparring with Aya before the expedition was like using a good whetstone to sharpen himself, sharpening all the immature details of his swordsmanship, making his non-phase sword more rounded. Sharpening his sword at any time, after all, would have some effect. A day later, the elders of Heavenly Sword Hall began to summon the successor disciples to the Stellar Peak. Wang Lu bid farewell to Aya and with the latter's blessing, stepped on the transmission array and arrived at the Stellar Peak. In front of the sect leader's bamboo room on the Stellar Peak, Lu Li had already arrived ahead of time. She was leaning against a few bamboos, holding a bag of nuts and tasting them. However, when she saw Wang Lu, she threw away the nuts, cheerfully jumped over, hugged Wang Lu, and said with a silly smile, "Master told me to listen to you. Then, let's shake hands. Oh. Sit down. Oh. Stand up. Oh." Wang Lu touched Lu Li's head and was about to praise her when he suddenly found out that not far away, several pairs of sharp sword-like eyes were firmly locked on him. Second Elder Lu Xian, Third Elder Feng He, Fourth Elder Zhou Ming. Almost all the Heavenly Sword Hall elders were gathered here, coldly watching his pet teasing behavior. Wang Lu coughed and tried to explain. "Just now, we prepared to perform a skit for everyone at the annual meeting. It's called, 'Shiman Qing Skillfully Plays Snoopy. Please correct me.'"
Humph. Zhou Ming coldly humphed and turned his head away. Most of the other elders were also indifferent.
Only his master fiercely gave him a thumbs up and secretly said through primordial spirit, "Brat, good job, Brilliant Peak is very rich. You have to stabilize this money tree for me."
"Stabilize your grandpa, Wang Lu."
While he was feeling awkward, the sect leader faintly opened his mouth. "Yes. This time, you will lead the team to the ancient sword tomb.
You are born smart, and you have experienced a lot of things in the past 10 years.
I don't need to say anything unnecessary, but I still want to emphasize that you are the lead disciple of the sect. This is not only a right, but also an obligation."
Wang Lu sternly said, "I understand.
I will certainly take good care of junior sister Lu Li and senior sister Xueqi.
I will not disappoint other people's trust in me."
Feng Yin shook his head. "It's good to have such determination, but there's still one thing wrong. Yao Er will not be in the same team as you. She will be alone." Wang Lu was taken aback. His eyes turned to the bamboo room. A tall woman quietly stood in the shadow of the bamboo room's corner. She was aloof from the world, but her arrogant posture was also undeniable. "Interesting. Does she look down on us, a group of burdens?"
Wang Lu smiled.
"Then let's wait and see. Let's see who is better, this god of hoodlums or me, this professional adventurer." Feng Yin also said, "But in addition to Lu Li, you still have other team members to take care of. Xian, come." "Yes." Along with the soft voice of a woman, the air on the Stellar Peak suddenly became a bit more refreshing. A white figure slowly walked out from the bamboo forest.
With a faint smile, Bai Xian walked to the front of the bamboo room, nodded to the Heavenly Sword Hall elders one by one, and then smiled at Wang Lu.
"Senior brother. Wang Lu, long time no see."
Wang Lu suddenly understood.
"Indeed, long time no see. In a blink of an eye, you seem to have grown up." More than a month ago, Bai Xian was brought back to the Clear Sky Peak by the 7th Elder for closed-door training. Now that they met again, Bai Xian still maintained her slightly immature and childish appearance, but her expression was calm and composed. She was no longer the simple immortal beast that could be deceived by a bone. Wang Lu sighed with emotion. Bai Xian and Lu Li were, after all, different. In this more than a month at the Clear Sky Peak, Bai Xian's harvest was obviously not only the healing of her internal injuries, but she also learned a lot of common sense from Uncle Guanhai. Now, Bai Xian was still pure and natural, but she appeared to be a lot more mature. Only, deep in her eyes,
there was still a trace of affection that could only be opened to him.
Xueqi is an immortal beast with innate magical ability. With her help, I believe we can be like a tiger that has grown wings.
With that, the sect leader flipped his palm, and the stellar peak suddenly glowed with starlight.
Since everyone is here, no need to waste time. You guys go ahead.
According to the agreement between Lingjian School, Kunlun Sect, and 10,000 Arts Sect, in order to keep it a secret, when the time came, the three sects would each open the transmission portal to the treasure room of the Sword Tomb and then converge inside the Sword Tomb. Among them, at the end of the experiential learning, the disciples of Kunlun Sect and 10,000 Arts Sect had left a transmission mark in the treasure room. Although Xueqi didn't remember to leave the mark, the mysterious underworld ancient sword in her hand could directly resonate with the Sword Tomb. In this way, they could avoid the eyes and ears of other sections. Under the instruction of the sect leader, Xueqi, Wang Lu, Lu Li, by Xueqian, the four people representing Lingjian School stepped into the sea of starlight, feeling the turbulence of space, ready to meet the new test. Feng Yin controlled the array, tearing the space with his deity stage cultivation base, and his magical power pierced through the void, going straight to the unnamed space where the Sword Tomb was located. On the stellar peak, the reward-giver elder couldn't help but give his last exhortation. In this trip, our Lingjian School has the least number of people, but you must show the style of Lingjian School, neither servile nor overbearing. Of course, the three sects still focus on cooperation. Don't be too confrontational, so as to spoil the important matter. In short, the nagging voice hasn't stopped yet. Along with Feng Yin Taoist Master's command, the scenery in front of Wang Lu and the others suddenly distorted, and in the blink of an eye, everything turned gray. According to the plan, after the transmission was launched, they would stop at the treasure room of the ancient Sword Tomb. There Wang Lu and the others would meet up with the people of Kunlun Sect and 10,000 Arts Sect to dig deeper secrets of the Sword Tomb.
It was just that. Wang Lu frowned, inwardly puzzled. Previously, no one said that there were so many people from Kunlun Sect and 10,000 Arts Sect, right? Looking at the huge team of more than 30 people, as well as the fluctuation of magical power that was very different from that of Kunlun Sect and 10,000 Arts Sect, Wang Lu's heart slightly sank. The trip to the Sword Tomb had just begun, but the situation seemed to have developed in an uncontrollable direction.
Chapter 231. The treasure room of the Sword Tomb was relatively spacious, but at this time with more than 30 to 40 people squeezed in, it seemed a bit cramped, and the atmosphere was quite subtle. When Wang Lu and the others appeared from the transmission array, they immediately attracted everyone's attention, just like pouring cold water into a hot pan.
Who are they? Again. Hurry up and tell them to get out of here, this group of trash. The noise of life made Wang Lu frown. This kind of chaos was not in line with any plan. However, there was a way to deal with the unplanned situation. As long as he didn't change, there was nothing to be afraid of. Calming himself down, Wang Lu swept his eyes around. Among the large group of unfamiliar faces, he also found a few familiar faces. The other side, of course, also discovered Wang Lu. After a moment of hesitation, they came over. Brother Wang. A slight smile hung on Wang Lu's face. Little hi. There's also Brother Zai over there. Long time no see. These people were the disciples of the 10,000 Arts Sect, led by their eldest brother Zhan Zai. In the past, when the two sects met, Yi Feifei, Zhao Zhongyuan, and the others were also present. Behind them were two people with similar age and cultivation base. Obviously, they were also the elite disciples of the 10,000 Arts Sect. What's going on here? Hai Yunfan wryly smiled. Man proposes, but God disposes. For a disciple of the 10,000 Arts Sect to say this, it seemed like a great change had happened. Moreover, it was a change that was difficult to deal with. Combined with the situation at the scene, Wang Lu thought for a moment and then said, Shangjing Sect. Although he didn't understand why the strictly confidential operation would be interrupted by the Shangjing Sect, but to be able to make the calculation of the three sects fail, to make the Feng Yin Taoist master unable to deduce it, and to make the disciples of the 10,000 Arts Sect, one of the five uniques, feel deeply helpless. No matter how he thought about it, only the Shangjing Sect could meet this condition. Yes, it's the Shangjing Sect. A vigorous and powerful voice suddenly came in, and then a tall male cultivator separated from the crowd and walked to the front of Wang Lu, covering him in his shadow. Wang Lu's talent could be considered above average, but in front of this person, he was like an underdeveloped child. If one were to look at him at eye level, they would only be able to see his chest. Then, without raising his head, Wang Lu stared at the other party's chest and said, "Fellow Taoist from Shengjing? Please forgive me for not going out to welcome you, esteemed guest." Although the cultivators of Shengjing sect were tall, they were not reckless people. How could they not understand the implication of Wang Lu's words, which was that they were uninvited guests? However, he didn't care about the implied words and snorted coldly, "You're from Lingjian school? I have nothing to say to you. Go back to where you came from and stop being a hindrance here." Wang Lu lightly said, "Turtle dove occupying magpie's nest. Is this your Shengjing sect's way of doing things? A dove occupying a magpie's nest? Ridiculous. Since when did ownerless things become your family's things?" Hearing this remark, Wang Lu suddenly laughed, and then looked up. "Since you also admit that it's ownerless things, then at least it's not considered as Shengjing sects. Let's put aside our dispute and jointly develop it. As for exploring the depths of the sword tomb, it's up to our own chance. That's not bad." "What a glib tongue." The tall cultivator sneered a few times, but didn't speak again. His condescending eyes revealed a trace of appreciation. Different from Zhou Mumu of Kunlun sect and Zhan Zai of 10,000 Arts sect, the young cultivator from Blue River region, his words were more shrewd and more pragmatic. When they first met the people from Kunlun sect, the two sects almost fought. Zhou Mumu, the leader of Kunlun sect, didn't expect to meet Shengjing sect cultivators here. Surprised, she didn't hesitate to spew venomous slander, slandering Shengjing sect for using a despicable trick to steal the secret of the three sections. Later, when the people from 10,000 Arts sect arrived, they were also surprised. However, Zhan Zai was a bit calmer than Zhou Mumu. He guessed the inside story and didn't directly accuse Shengjing sect people of using despicable tricks. Instead, he emphasized that the sword tomb belonged to the three sects, Kunlun sect, 10,000 Arts sect and Spirit Sword sect, and Shengjing sect had no right to interfere. "That's all fart. Despicable trick to steal the secret of the three sects? If Shengjing sect wanted to know, why would they need to steal your information? They were really short-sighted, looking at the sky from the bottom of a well." Shengjing sect spread their influence all over the 9 regions, not just for the immediate benefit. The 9 regions strategy has been implemented for more than 1,000 years, but Shengjing sect actually didn't really do much plundering. They just deeply engraved the mark of Shengjing sect in every part of the 9 regions. Later, the sect leader Hichu Daoren spent 100 years to build the Immortal Treasure 9 regions map in Shengjing Immortal City, which connected the geography of the 9 regions. From then on, all the major events in the world were under his control. Therefore, how could Shengjing sect not know about the appearance of the ancient sword tomb in the southern heaven region? Of course, even if it was the Immortal Treasure 9 regions map, it was impossible to calculate all the changes in the world. It could only perceive the major events, but the details were vague. And in the area where Shengjing sect's power was slightly inferior, the 9 regions map's response was relatively insensitive. Plus, the 9 regions was so big that changes were happening all the time. No matter how powerful Shengjing sect was, it was difficult for them to take all of them into account. For example, the news about the birth of the immortal beast on the Grand Cloud Mountain in the Grand Cloud Mountain was vague on the 9 regions map, so it didn't attract enough attention. Later, when the Immortal Treasure map issued a warning, Bai Shixian had already completed her transformation, and the 5th Elder of Spirit Sword Mountain personally went to the Grand Cloud Mountain. Thus, Shengjing sect had to give up. As for the ancient sword tomb in the southern heaven region, Shengjing sect also misjudged it. They mistakenly thought that there were, at most, 1 or 2 high-rank spiritual treasures in the sword tomb, which was not worth spending too much manpower and material resources. At that time, there were already 3 sects from the 5 uniques competing for it, so there was no need for Shengjing sect to forcefully intervene. However, when the Lingjian school disciples took away the treasure, Shengjing sect discovered the abnormality. In the 9 regions map, the symbol of the birth of the rare treasure in the southern heaven region not only didn't disperse, but instead, it vaguely showed a stronger tendency. It was just that, indistinct and intermittent. The sect leader calculated with his supreme divination technique, and determined that there might be a secret in the depths of the sword tomb. It was just that, as an inheritance tomb, it was not suitable to break it with brute force. Thus, he immediately ordered the elite disciples of the Immortal Sect to form a team to explore it. The reaction of Shengjing sect was actually a bit slower than that of the other 3 sections. However,
The extraordinariness of this leader of the immortal sect was without a doubt. Although it started late, its unique internal management model allowed it to complete the organization mobilization in the first instance. From the central region immortal city as well as its various branches, it gathered a 25-people team and directly rushed to the entrance of the Sword Tomb. They didn't have the transmission mark left by Kunlun Immortal Sect's 10,000 Arts Sect and the others, so they started from the beginning. The first 3 passes only took them half a day to completely break through, which was an exceptionally amazing efficiency. Of course, this was normal for the people of Shangjing sect. Although these 25 people were hastily assembled, they were the elites of the immortal sect, absolutely not mediocre. The leader was the 7th of the 19 successor disciples of the immortal sect, Power King Zhonglu, who was at the peak of Shudan stage. His mysterious gold unbreakable body had reached the 16th layer, and his comprehensive strength was not inferior to the other lead disciples of the 5 uniques. His deputies were the twins Wangyuel Wanyu and Wangyuel Wanyun, who were ranked 70 and 18th among the 19 successor disciples. The 2 of them held the Yin and Yang treasure chest, and when they joined forces, their strength was even a notch higher than Zhonglu's. The remaining 20 or so cultivators were also the absolute elites of the immortal sect, with the lowest cultivation base being middle-level Shudan. Coupled with their superior cultivation method and magical treasures, their comprehensive strength was not much inferior to that of Taoist Master King Pil of a common high-rank sect. With such a powerful team, why would they need to steal the news of Kunlun Immortal Sect and 10,000 Arts Sect? Relying on their own ability alone was enough to be successful in every endeavor in the Sword Tomb. Uninvited guests, turtle-dove occupying the magpie's nest? How ridiculous! When their team entered the treasure room and was about to open the entrance of the 4th pass, Kunlun Sect's Zhou Mumu had just arrived. 10,000 Arts Sect's Zhan Zai and the others were nowhere to be seen. The uninvited guests should be the disciples of Kunlun Immortal Sect and the other 2 sects. After realizing this problem, Wang Lu simply didn't entangle himself with the ownership and development of the Sword Tomb. Instead, he directly put forward the argument that they should put aside the dispute, avoiding the disadvantage. From a reasonable point of view, this argument was the most difficult to refute. Because although Shangjing sect was the first to arrive, compared to the other 3 sects, they had, after all, lost the initiative. Thus, it was completely unclear who the right to develop the Sword Tomb belonged to. And how to deal with this unclear issue? It was very simple. One was Wang Lu's proposal to put aside the dispute and focus on developing the treasure of the Sword Tomb first. The other was, "What a joke, who wants to put aside the dispute with you?" From the Shangjing sect team, a tall and thin cultivator sneered. "Do you think you can compete with Shangjing sect for the treasure of the Sword Tomb?" However, before Wang Lu could speak, a heroic young girl from the Kunlun Immortal Sect team furrowed her willowy eyebrows and angrily rebuked, "Wishful thinking? Didn't your sect master teach you first come, first served?" "First come, first served? When I came here you Zhou Mumu were still on the road, yet you have the nerve to talk about first come, first served. Your Kunlun Immortal Sect has always boasted itself as the ancestor of the immortal path. How could you not distinguish right from wrong? The last time we came here, your Shangjing sect didn't even know this place." Seeing that the 2 sides were going to talk about the same old thing again, the Shangjing sect's cultivators didn't say much. More than 20 people simultaneously took a step forward. Under the pressure of their astonishing imposing manner, the 6 people from Kunlun Immortal Sect suddenly looked a bit ugly. No matter how strong their mouth was, they couldn't deny the fact that Shangjing sect was the strongest among them. Among the 25 people, any one of them was not weak. The imposing manner of the Kunlun Immortal Sect's cultivators was a notch lower. Zhou Mumu hastily turned to look at the 10,000 Arts Sect. Although the 2 sects weren't that close, they, after all, joined hands last time. Zhan Zai's 10,000 methods comprehension skill had an astonishing strength, so he could be a very powerful support. However, when her eyes turned, Zhou Mumu couldn't help but be stunned. The last time they met, Zhan Zai, who was quite heroic and somewhat bookish, was now like a young man who had his first awakening of love. His face was full of shyness, and from time to time, he would secretly glance at a naked girl from the Lingjian school. Your mother. What the hell are you doing here?" Zhan Zai was unreliable, so Zhou Mumu had to pin her hope on the Lingjian school. Previously, she didn't have much contact with the cultivators of the Lingjian school, but she had long heard of the name of the lead disciple of Spirit Sword Sect, Wang Lu.
Moreover, in the last trip to the sword tomb, she received a sword strike from Xueqi, which nearly shattered her immortal Tai exquisite body. If the Lingjian school was willing to take the lead, the three sects might be able to fight against Shangjing sect. Heh, allow me to say a few words. While the situation was tense, Wang Lu said, this ancient sword tomb was left behind by a true immortal from the ancient times, and its level is far beyond the present age. Moreover, after experiencing the catastrophe of the Age of Chaos, it's likely that there are quite a number of mechanisms malfunctioning or mutation, making it even more dangerous. Although your sect's team is powerful, I'm afraid it's unrealistic to say that it's like walking on flat ground. Similarly, it's the same for our Spirit Sword sect, Kunlun Immortal sect, and 10,000 Art sect. So instead of having internal friction, it's better for us to join hands and explore it. The scale of this sword tomb is unprecedented, and there are countless treasures, so why do we have to eat it alone? Zhonglu nodded and said, Shangjing sect doesn't necessarily want to eat it alone. If we can get strong support in the process of exploring the sword tomb, that would naturally be a good thing. However, we're worried that when the time comes, we won't get a helping hand, but a dagger from the back. This Power King Zhonglu was tall and strong, and his method was firm and fierce, but his mind was calm and meticulous, which was quite inconsistent with his appearance. Wang Lu said with a smile, then let's make the big heart demon oath. However, this time, it was the Kunlun sect people who came to undermine them. Seeing that Wang Lu wanted to join hands with Shangjing sect, Zhou Mumu was quite annoyed. Is your Lingjian school so spineless? Seeing Shangjing sect, you can't even stand firm and shamelessly flatter them? Zhonglu laughed. See that? Even your three sects are scheming against each other. How can I feel at ease to accept you as my teammates? Moreover, what Brother Wang just said is right. This ancient sword tomb is extremely dangerous. Even our Shangjing sect has to be careful. As for your three sects, I won't say that you're just a motley crew. Just save your energy and go home early. The 9 regions is vast, and there are countless immortal opportunities. Our Shangjing sect doesn't want to eat all the benefits, so if we can't, you guys can freely play to your heart's content. Wang Lu raised his eyebrows. Isn't it clear that you're only giving the leftovers to others? If you guys really have the ability, Shangjing sect welcomes you to compete. Unfortunately, even if your 3 sects join forces, it's still not enough. Wang Lu said that he was waiting for this sentence. However, before he could open his mouth, he heard a stuttering but ice-cold voice behind him. So noisy, so noisy. The next moment, the dazzling starlight sprinkled in every corner of the treasure room. Tens of thousands of cold stars made people feel as if they had fallen into an ice cave. However, once they reached out and touched the starlight, they could feel the astonishing heat bursting out from it. Ice and fire intertwined. Under the illumination of the starlight, this ancient sword tomb vaguely shook. A moment later, a burst of collapsing sound came from a gray wall. The treasure room was actually broken. The passage to the 4th level of the sword tomb also leaked out from behind the wall. While everyone was incomparably shocked, Zhu Shiyao completely ignored the dispute between Shangjing sect and the other 3 sections. Her figure, like a breeze, floated toward the entrance to the 4th level. Wait a minute. The Shangjing sect cultivator who was closest to the wall reacted and reached out to stop her. However, when his 5 fingers opened and closed, the space collapsed and the 5 elements became chaotic, showing his terrifying power. Don't block the way. Bam. The crowd couldn't even see what happened, but the cultivator who reached out to stop her was hit back by an incomparably huge force and flew into the air like a straw. Power King Zhonglu stared with eyes wide open, unable to believe what he saw. The person who was sent flying was one of the vice-captains of Shangjing sect, Wang Yuanyun. That seemingly ordinary person, but between his palms there was the yin and yang universe, the most unpredictable peak shoot-on-stage cultivator. After a moment of consternation, Zhonglu chased after him in big strides and roared, "Want to run?" The other cultivators of Shangjing sect immediately followed. The 25 people, one after another, poured into the hole in the wall. As for the cultivators of the other 3 sections, tisk, things are really hard to predict. Come on, what are you waiting for? Let's catch up. Following Wang Lu's call, the cultivators of the other 3 sects immediately followed in silence. Seeing that the previously difficult-to-solve deadlock was so violently broken, everyone's heart had different feelings. Among them, Wang Lu felt it the most. Sure enough, 1,000 words are not as good as a straight stab. Chapter 232. What a frightening stellar sword. What a frightening spirit sword sect people. Running in the gray corridor behind the wall, Power King Zhonglu's momentum was like a rainbow. His well-tempered mysterious golden battle body released an astonishing amount of energy, which was unstoppable. However, while running, Zhonglu's heart couldn't help but surge with a burst of chill. Just now, when that earth-shaking stellar sword light shone, everything around him seemed to have stagnated, and the world fell into black and white. Only a tall and elegant figure bloomed with her own color, aloof from the world, aloof and aloof, disdainful of everything around her. That sword strike was aimed at the wall, and this ancient sword tomb that was built by a true immortal level method was actually broken under the might of that sword strike. Even the 25 people of Xueqi sect couldn't easily open the door to the 4th level, yet it was broken by her sword strike. What if that sword strike was aimed at him? Could the mysterious golden battle body withstand the stellar sword chi? Zhonglu had no confidence. When Wang Yuanyun intercepted it with his yin and yang 5 elements divine claw, he was under the protection of the mountain array. It could be said that there were 24 people sharing the damage. Even a Yuanying stage cultivator would find it difficult to injure him. However, in front of that unpredictable stellar sword chi, he unexpectedly couldn't resist even the slightest bit. Zhonglu clearly saw that what was broken was not the 25 people's joint defense, but the mountain array. Zhu Shiyao's marvelous swordsmanship broke the battle array and then defeated Wang Yuanyun, during which, her figure didn't stop even for a moment. This kind of method was truly marvelous. Let alone her shoot on stage, even among the Taoist masters of King Pill, very few people could do this. Therefore, this was also the reason why Zhonglu immediately led everyone to rush into the 4th level, regardless of the other 3 sections. Even if they could block the other 3 sects, so what? If they let Zhu Shiyao go in, who knew how far she could go? He heard that before, she directly entered the treasure room on the 3rd level, which obviously meant that she had a great immortal affinity. It was very likely that she was recognized as the successor of the inheritance tomb. Therefore, no matter who went in, they couldn't let her go. As for the division of forces, it was even more foolish. Xueqi sect's team was indeed the strongest, but the other 3 sects were absolutely not weak. If they joined forces, their strength would actually be similar to the 25-people team of Xueqi sect. Once they divided their forces, the consequences would be difficult to predict. At this time, perhaps it was as the first seat of Lingzhen School Wang Lu had said, teaming up was the right choice. Senior brother, what do we do now? Behind her, Wang Yuanyun quickly caught up. He was injured by Zhu Shiyao's sword, and although he was treated by his fellow disciples, his complexion was still somewhat pale. Zhonglu said, let's follow them first. As for those 3 sects cultivators, don't worry about them. Since we can't stop them at the checkpoint, there's no need to waste time on internal strife. Yes, I understand. Wang Yuanyun nodded and asked again, Senior brother, I can't sense her aura. Are you still locking on to her? Being asked about this matter, Zhonglu was silent for a moment, and then said through primordial spirit, not at all. After stepping into the passage, I completely lost the clue. I suspect that the problem lies with the sword catacomb itself. This place looks like a straight path, but it's very likely that there are other mysteries. You must take care of your junior brothers and sisters. Don't let them get lost. Rest assured, Luanyu is presiding over the mountain chain array, so she won't easily get lost. Luanyun said and then frowned. But the strange thing is, that Zhu Shiyao disappeared without a trace as if she was sent to another place by the sword catacomb. However, the other people have been following behind us like maggots on a tarsal bone. This is also a good thing. It shows that they have no way to keep up with Zhu Shiyao. Those people from Lingzhen School are very interesting. They don't seem to be that united. Halfway through his words, Zhonglu shook his head and no longer thought about it. Forget it. Now is not the time to think about this. I feel that the passage is about to end. Let everyone get ready. At the same time, Wang Lu, who followed the Xueqi sect team into the 4th level, was also confused. Little Bai, can you still smell Big Sister's scent? No, she's no longer in this level. Bai Shixian, who was walking side by side with Wang Lu, wrinkled her nose and then gently shook her head. As an immortal beast, Bai Shixian naturally had a keen sense of smell that was superior to any human. Coupled with her pure Yin constitution, her perception even surpassed that of a Yuanying stage cultivator. If she said no, then she must be gone. Hee, 1,000 skills is really not as good as a plug-in. Wang Lu sighed with emotion. Big sister is indeed big sister.
Senior brother, has big sister found the treasure?
Lu Li curiously asked. Then can we go back? There's a smell here that makes me very uncomfortable. The stale air from 10,000 years ago, of course it's uncomfortable. However, it's not to the extent of stopping. Big sister has her immortal fate, but our immortal fate path has not been cut off. Otherwise, there's no need for the sword catacomb to design this endless passage and continue to maintain the trial level. This sword catacomb is the relic of a true immortal, so no one can monopolize it. She can take it and we can explore it. Lu Li was somewhat disappointed, but since Wang Lu said so, she had no objection. Senior brother, I smell a different smell. The passage should be coming to an end. A moment later, the Shangjing sect team in the front suddenly accelerated, apparently also aware of the change. After about a cup of tea time, the passage suddenly opened up, and in front of them was a bright sunshine. Walking out of the dark and narrow passageway, the first thing that came into view was a majestic mountain range. The exit of the passageway was set at the peak of a towering mountain. The top of the mountain was a flat open space. The area was abnormally vast, just like a plane. This magical ability of space transformation is really amazing, worthy to be an immortal technique. Looking at the vast and boundless space, the big brother of the 10,000 art sect, Zhan Zai, sincerely sighed with emotion.
As an academic cultivator, he was very clear about the astonishing amount of magical power needed to open up such a place in the sword catacomb.
Although it was normal for a decent sect to open up an immortal cave in their sect, the space was rarely this vast. And this was just one of the trials designed by the sword catacomb to select its successor.
However, for the other people, the issue that was worth paying attention to was obviously not the immortal technique of the immortal from ancient times.
How could they continue the fourth trial? What kind of clues were hidden in this mountain range? How should they deal with the relationship with the other sects in the process of conquering this place? Because of Zhu Shiyao's soul-stirring sword strike, the original stalemate situation was broken. The people of the four sects simultaneously entered the fourth trial of the ancient sword catacomb, vaguely forming an alliance. However, everyone knew that sincere cooperation was absolutely a fantasy. Just as everyone was immersed in their own thoughts, a strange voice suddenly rang out in everyone's mind. #yen% at #yen.
What? Most of the cultivators of the four sects looked at each other in blank dismay, but there were also a few people who seemed to be thinking about something.
This is an ancient language that was once popular in the Age of Chaos before the Age of Chaos. The one who first revealed the riddle was Hai Yunfan of the 10,000 Art Sect. The cultivators of the 10,000 Art Sect were good at academics, and the elites of the sects who came to the sword catacomb also had their own strong points. Among them, Hai Yunfan was quite knowledgeable in the ancient language. What I heard was, defeat the Guardian and enter the next trial. A moment later, Zhou Mumu of Kunlun sect nodded and said, what I heard is the same. As the most ancient sect in the Wanxian League, Kunlun sect also had a deep understanding of ancient things. Most of their disciples were experts in ancient knowledge. Yes, the content is indeed like that. Probably not wrong. This time, Shangjing sect sent their elite team, among which, there were also talents who understood the ancient language. While the other three sects were exchanging their experience, Wang Lu also tried his best to recall what he had learned. According to the relevant records in the 10,000 Strange Tales of the 9 regions, this is the common language that spread in most of the southern parts of the 9 regions before the Age of Chaos. However, judging from the pronunciation, it should have spread 11,000 years ago in the Jianma mountain area of the Baili region, which is today's local dialect variant of the southern region. In the book Bai Li's Ascension to Heaven, it recorded the true immortals who came from the Baili region. Before the Age of Chaos, it was rumored that there were 3 true immortals: 100 Eyes Supreme, Flame River Supreme, and Purple Yuan Supreme. Among them, 100 Eyes Supreme was alone, so it doesn't seem like he would leave behind a legacy for future generations. As for whether it's the other 2 true immortals, further research is needed. However, it can provide people with materials for speculation. While thinking, he observed the indifferent exchange between the other 3 sections. However, Wang Lu actually found it funny. Although he was nicknamed the top student of Spirit Sword Sect, he didn't dare to claim that he had top-notch knowledge.
Especially now that the elites of the 5 uniques had gathered, no one dared to say that he could beat the others. The attainments of the disciples of the other 3 sects in the ancient language should not be below him, but now, they pretended to understand and exchange with each other, which was really ridiculous. They were all old guns, so why would they pretend to be young? It was nothing more than feeling that the atmosphere here was strange. Plus, since the 4 sects had already coexisted, they had the intention to further cooperate. Using the academic exchange as a prelude, they began to have a dialogue between the teams. However, this was also good. At least it was better than fighting each other as soon as they arrived. The ancient sword tomb of the true immortal level, even a professional adventurer would find it difficult to solo, unless it was a lifetime cheat like Big Sister. Having several piles of cannon fodder around was absolutely useful. At this time, the people of the other 3 sects had just finished the foreplay and began to exchange the real valuable topic. They then heard Power King Zhonglu ask, "So, who exactly is this voice?" Zhou Mumu said, "In the ancient era, most of the time, there will be a guardian similar to the spirit of the tool to guide the later generation to complete the inheritance. It's just that, perhaps because it's been too long, this guardian has lost its spirituality. Just now, I tried several methods to call it, but the response I got was the same sentence." Hai Yunfan said, "It's a non-intelligent character. But his hint is not wrong. We have to defeat the guardian to enter the next level." Zhonglu agreed. Although this world is vast, it's completely lifeless, and there's no clue to the next level. It's just that, who exactly is the guardian that it mentioned? Zhou Mumu also said awkwardly, "There's no clue at all. Moreover, it's strange that although this mountain is vast, there's not even the slightest breath of life. Even the vegetation is very sparse. As for the guardian, I can't see it at all." "How could you not see it?" Wang Lu's timely interjection successfully attracted everyone's attention. Zhonglu earnestly asked, "Did you find it?" Wang Lu stretched out his hand and pointed forward. Among the rolling mountains, a towering mountain was particularly eye-catching. Looking from afar, the peak of the mountain went straight into the clouds, and the huge mountain shrouded the entire lake in its shadow. Even from a distance, they could feel an astonishing sense of oppression. "Isn't that it?" Following the guidance of Wang Lu, Zhou Mumu and the others carefully observed the mountain. Although they couldn't find any spirituality, but it was true that the shape of the mountain was vaguely humanoid. Power King Zhonglu sucked in a mouthful of cold air. "It can't be, right?" Wang Lu sneered. "What are you afraid of? It's just a mere 10,000 feet level trash." Chapter 233. Does this sword tomb have any sincerity at all? The lead disciple of Kunlun sect, Zhou Mumu, stared dumbfoundedly at the towering mountain in the distance. Inwardly, she felt that it was absurd and unbelievable. Is this a guardian? This is AF * King Guardian? The condition for us to enter the next level is to defeat a 10,000 feet tall mountain? Are you kidding me? Although many people would describe the magical ability of cultivators with words like moving mountains and filling the sea, and in fact, the great supreme level cultivators in the Wanxian League did have the ability to move mountains and fill the sea. However, among the cultivators present, there was not even a single Taoist master. So how could they move mountains? Not to mention the guardian was not a dead thing, it had a mountain-like body, so its magical ability was certainly higher than that of a mountain. According to legend, only the ancestors of the Desolation Age, which was even earlier than ancient times, had this kind of sky-covering body. And if any of these ancestors were to be brought to this world, perhaps they would have the power to sweep the 9 regions. Of course, if they were really the ancestors of the ancient era, they would not have fallen to be the watchdog of an ancient true immortal, not even the watchdog of the last level. However, the strength of this guardian was too beyond their expectation. At this time, even the most arrogant Shangjing sect people could not help but rejoice that they didn't adopt a high-pressure policy to try to monopolize the sword tomb. The people of 10,000 Arts sect were even more puzzled. Why would the master of this place leave such a test? Don't you think it's too difficult? Wang Lu said, "It's probably because the guardian of 10,000 years ago was not so powerful." Upon hearing this, everyone was stunned, and then they realized that this 10,000 feet tall mountain was likely the result of the passage of 10,000 years. Just like a small sapling growing into a towering ancient tree,
The guardian of that time may only be a strong enemy for the later inheritor, but now Zhou Mumu frowned.
But why can't I feel any spiritual energy?
Wang Lu spread out his hands.
Because it's dead.
Dead? 10,000 years have passed, except for vegetative people, who could not die. Not to mention the passage of time here is probably not the same as the outside. 10,000 years outside may be doubled or even more in here.
Zhou Mumu asked again.
The guardian is dead. What should we do? Whipping corpses. Wang Lu said, I don't know. Maybe there is no good answer to this question. After all, this sword tomb has been sleeping for too long and has experienced the Dharma-ending catastrophe. Many things can't be seen according to the rules. Even if we really encounter a dead end, we have nothing to say. After that, there was a long silence on the summit. The other three sects naturally wouldn't completely believe what Wang Lu said. The cultivators of Shangjing's sect were divided into 5 teams to explore this vast mountain area. A moment later, the people of 10,000 Arts sect and Kunlun Immortal sect also left. However, everyone agreed to meet here half a day later. Wang Lu shook his head and didn't go down the mountain. Instead, he made a bonfire and began to cook for Lu Li and Bai Shixian. Lu Li was the easiest to take care of. As long as she ate and drank her fill, she could be happy at any time.
However, Bai Shixian was still frowning. Senior martial brother, this place's aura is very strange. I can't feel the spirituality of anything.
Wang Lu said, this is just the inner space of the sword tomb. It has been sleeping for thousands of years, so how could there be spirituality of anything here? Bai Shixian awkwardly said, things are more complicated than I said. My expression might not be appropriate in fact, however, before she could continue, Wang Lu had already covered her lips with his hand and shook his head, indicating that she didn't need to say anything. Bai Shixian gawked for a moment. She realized that Wang Lu probably had a deeper idea, and not because he didn't think it through. Immediately, the worry in her heart disappeared, and a smile hung on her face. For a time, it was too beautiful to behold. Half a day later, the people of the other 3 sects came back with a complex look. After half a day, they have seen what they wanted to see and tried what they wanted to try. The most radical Shangjing sect people even tried to bombard the mountain with their most destructive immortal method. As a result, they only managed to create a 100-meter-deep pit on the steel-like mountain. The power was indeed amazing, but it was completely meaningless. Whipping the corpses didn't count as defeating the guardian. Zhonglu's heart was filled with bad luck as he strode toward Wang Lu. If you have a way, just say it. Wang Lu said, to be honest, there's really no reliable way, but there's a crooked way. If your 3 sects don't have a way, you might as well use it to rescue it. How to do it? First, resurrect it, and then kill it. Because the condition is to defeat it, if there's no struggle, it probably can't be counted as defeat. Therefore, first create the conditions for it to struggle. Zhonglu angrily said, you're simply indulging in fantasy. Resurrect from the dead?
Let alone such a behemoth, even if it's a dead rabbit. Do you have the ability to bring its soul back for me to see?
A dead person could not be resurrected. Although this was not an absolute theorem in the immortal cultivation world, the difficulty of resurrecting from the dead was very high. It was not something that a group of Shudan stage disciples could easily achieve, let alone the object of resurrection was a tens of thousands of meters tall mountain. Wang Lu said, your thinking is constrained by common sense.
In fact, on the other hand, because this big guy's level is much higher than that of a wild rabbit, it's actually easier to achieve the resurrection. Especially since its body has evolved to the extent of being able to support the heavens and the earth, it's very likely that what it needs is just a stimulus.
Upon hearing this, Zhang Lu gawked. A faint light flashed through his mind, but he couldn't grasp the details. After all, he was known for his mysterious golden body, so he didn't know much about methods. However, when the others heard Wang Lu's words, they were greatly inspired, especially 10,000 Arts sects Yi Feifei, who beamed with joy. That's right. In fact, the higher the level of existence, the easier it is to have life characteristics. Compared to the wilderness, the mountain spirit is more likely to appear in the immortal cultivation paradise. High-rank spirit object is more likely to turn into a spirit than an ordinary object.
And the heaven stone is far more likely to obtain the good fortune of heaven and earth than an ordinary stone. According to this principle, even if this big guy died after all, it left behind such a powerful body.
Perhaps there's really a hope to resurrect it. Zhonglu still couldn't agree. It's still a whimsical idea.
For such a huge creature, even if it can be resurrected, the amount of magical power required is enormous, which we can't afford.
Wang Lu said, therefore, this is a last-ditch rescue plan. If you have a better way, I absolutely won't say anything, but do you?
Although this method is whimsical, it is, after all, a clear direction that we can strive for.
Moreover, everyone here has at least Shudon stage cultivation base. Needless to say, they also have elixirs, so a mere magical power supply shouldn't be a problem, right? Zhonglu hesitated for a moment and didn't rush to express his position. However, soon, the cultivators of the 10,000 Arts sect gave their approval. Zhanzai said, I agree with Brother Wang's plan. Although it sounds absurd, at least it's worth a try. A moment later, Zhou Mumu also nodded. In any case, there's no better way, so we might as well give it a try. Seeing that the three sects have already expressed their attitude, Zhonglu went with the flow. That being the case, let's try it according to your idea. 10,000 Arts sect, aren't you all good at all kinds of spells and arrays? Why don't you design a set of implementation plan, and the people of the other sects will cooperate with you? Zhanzai and the others didn't care about Zhonglu's arrogant attitude. Several of them gathered together and gradually immersed themselves in the academic atmosphere.
After discussing with each other in high spirits, Zhanzai concluded, there is indeed a suitable immortal method.
If that mountain is regarded as an ordinary creature, we can try to open its good fortune meridian, transforming pure magical power into the creature's good fortune chi and instilling it. If its physical level is high enough, it should have a reaction and condense its spirituality. Yi Feifei added, we have calculated it.
Although the magical power required is huge, if the people of the four sects can unite, we can completely afford it.
Hai Yunfan said, of course, we also need to pay attention to the degree of control. We resurrect it to defeat it.
If possible, it's best to control the resurrection strength to the minimum, only giving it a living state, not giving it the ability to move.
Zhou Mumu raised her eyebrows. That's right. If after resurrecting it, we find that we can't defeat it, that would be a joke. Good, since you have a way, our Kunlun immortal sect will go all out to catch up. Wang Lu also expressed his position. This plan is proposed by my Lingzhen school, so naturally, we are duty-bound to do it. Finally, Zhonglu made his decision. Then it's settled. Everyone, hurry up and implement it. Although the Shangjing sect was somewhat bossy, with a bureaucratic atmosphere, their action was really amazing. After the plan was finalized, more than 70% of the actual work was completed by Shangjing sect alone, including completing the array according to the diagram, pouring different attributes of pure magical power at the key nodes, and engraving the talismans on the mountain wall of the lofty mountain. Although in the eyes of many people, Shangjing sect's cultivators were nothing more than a group of arrogant nouveau riche, but since they could become the #1 sect in 9 regions, they naturally had their reasons. They didn't have as obvious characteristics as the other 4 super sects, but they won in all aspects. The overall cultivation of their disciples had no shortcomings. Whether it was the method system, body tempering, magical treasure, and even elixirs, Shangjing sect maintained a very high standard. Their comprehensive strength was really beyond the other 4 sections. Especially in the aspect of team organization and mobilization, they were even more powerful. Only the Royal Soldier sect could match them, but their comprehensive strength was far behind. However, even though the disciples of the several sects had come up with their real skills, the preparation work still took a full 3 days to come to an end. No less than 100,000 talismans were engraved on the lofty mountain, and they were connected by magical power ropes, which eventually converged at the foot of the mountain and froze into a mirror-like lake. The huge amount of work was enough to make those Taoist master-level cultivators of ordinary sects to lament their inadequacy. However, in the hands of this group of elite disciples of the 5 uniques, it was completed in 3 days. Good fortune meridian circulation was a marvelous immortal method that used an array to simulate the meridians of a living creature, completing the life energy cycle and thus stimulating its spirituality. The amount of magical power needed to activate the wisdom of a lofty mountain could be imagined, which was also the biggest difficulty in the plan. However, when they put it into practice, they found that it was a bit easier than expected. The magical power of Lingzhen schools by Xueqi was beyond everyone's imagination. She alone was equivalent to more than half of the group of Shangjing sect. The magical ability of a mortal beast was really amazing. However, when the lofty mountain slightly trembled under the stimulation of the meridian circulation, causing the earth to shake, no one had the time to marvel at the power of Bai Shixian. Zhonglu roared, "The guardian has been resurrected, everyone prepare to fight." Chapter 234. This was a battle that was doomed to be unconventional. Even if the present cultivators were already the most elite group of the 5 uniques of the Union of 10,000 Immortals, their real strength was far beyond what they appeared to be on the surface, and any one of the sects had the power to destroy a city and destroy a country. Even if the Guardian had just been resurrected by the extremely brilliant meridian circulation method and was in its weakest moment, it still seemed too powerful for the disciples of the 4 sections. To defeat this behemoth head-on, one must at least have the magical ability of deity stage, which was far beyond the upper limit of the disciples of the 4 sections. However, to defeat a target, why would they need to do it head-on? A tough and powerful warrior might not be defeated by a heavy hammer or a long sword, but a meat dumpling, or a poisonous mushroom, could bring his life to the end. Life, regardless of high or low, was powerful and fragile coexisting. As long as they found the right way to destroy it from the inside, perhaps with just a gentle push, it could make the building collapse. Therefore, the previous 3 days of arrangement of 100,000 talismans all over the mountain was not only to stimulate the life with a meridian circulation method, but more importantly, when the Guardian woke up from its slumber, these 100,000 talismans could reverse the meridian circulation, allowing the magical power to penetrate through the mountain's thick defense, directly extinguishing the vitality within its body, achieving the effect of internal destruction. Of course, achieving internal destruction was not easy. Bestowing life was one thing, but plundering was another. After all, the Guardian was a higher life form. The moment its vitality bloomed, it would enter a perfect cycle, constantly healing itself, and expel the harmful existence out of its body. In Wang Lu's words, this was an endless struggle against the Guardian's immune system. "Everyone get ready to fight." Zhonglu's roar was like the roar of spring thunder, with an unquestionable strong penetrating force, which was still clearly audible in the midst of the landslide. However, there was no need for him to say it. Every cultivator of Shangjing's sect, in the first moment, had found their own position. However, they didn't go straight to the sky to confront the Guardian head-on. Instead, they moved the battlefield to another location. They stood on the frozen lake, suppressing the more than 100,000 talismans that were reflected on the surface of the lake. On average, there were more than 4,000 mapping talismans under each person's feet. They needed to use their incomparably precise magic power to control each talisman precisely. It was like an extraordinarily skilled zither player, skillfully plucking the strings of the zither. For a moment, tens of thousands of starlight shone on the surface of the frozen lake, as if the Milky Way was reflecting itself. Meanwhile, innumerable ropes condensed from magical power extended from the surface of the ice to the mountain, faithfully transmitting the changes of the 100,000 talismans to the mountain. It was the latest artificial spirit object developed by the 10,000 Art sect, the 3rd type of spirit light guide cable, or optical cable for short. It transmitted the signal by magical light, and then encoded and decoded it with a special algorithm. It had a very high transmission efficiency and anti-interference ability. Even in the great shaking of the world, it could still maintain the signal transmission without error. Only by gathering the 100,000 talismans on the lofty mountain could it be possible for one person to suppress 4,000 talismans. If that wasn't the case, how could 100,000 talismans resonate with just a few dozen people? While the cultivators of Shangjing's sect were busy inputting the spirit light signal to guide the various abilities of the 100,000 talismans, the people of the 10,000 Art sect were nervously encoding and decoding the 100,000 signals. This kind of work not only required keen and delicate magical power control, but also required high-speed calculation, which only the people of the 10,000 Art sect could do. As for the cultivators of Kunlun's sect, they formed a heavenly Tao reincarnation array in mid-air, giving full play to their profound advantage, continuously pouring down pure magical power and spiritual energy, so that the present cultivators wouldn't have to worry about magical power exhaustion. The 3 people of Lingjian's school were the mobile force. In case of any accident, only they could deal with it. This task could be said to be difficult, because, according to the plan, the newly resurrected Guardian should have no resistance to the erosion of the reverse meridian. However, it could be said to be easy. Once there was any mistake in the plan, with one slap from this mountain giant, even a peak king pill stage cultivator would be turned into meat paste. The division of the task had been very detailed, but the situation was still out of control in the first place. The moment the Shangjing sect cultivators launched the array, an irresistible resistance was transmitted along the optical fiber. Even though the Guardian had just been resurrected and had no consciousness, only instinct, its subconscious struggle was still difficult to bear. At the same time, more than half of the cultivators of Shangjing sect were bleeding from their 7 orifices. Sitting in the center, Jianglu bore the brunt of the injury the most. Beads of blood oozed out from all the pores of his body, which then evaporated into mist due to the extremely high body temperature. His vitality rapidly passed away, but he didn't waver in the slightest. Instead, his body became more firm. Hold on. However, without needing Jianglu to say anything, the cultivators of Shangjing sect, as if by prior agreement, simultaneously burned their innate vitality. Shangjing sect's absolutely strong development strategy in 9 regions had repeatedly made them the most unpopular sect in the eyes of the various sects of the Wanxian League. However, in contrast to their wild posture, when they were needed to shoulder the responsibility, Shangjing sect was often duty-bound. Perhaps it was because of their absolute confidence in their own strength, or perhaps they just wanted to show off their prestige. In general, no matter how dissatisfied they were, it was undeniable that as the big brother of the Wanxian League, Shangjing sect's overall performance was absolutely qualified. However, relying solely on the desperate efforts of Shangjing sect cultivators was obviously not enough to shake the situation. How could dozens of ants do anything to the trampling of a giant elephant? TSK, we already have something to do, let's get started. Seeing that the situation was beyond his expectation, Wang Lu, without any hesitation, flew straight to the sky with Lu Li and Bai Shixian. Then Bai Shixian made the first move. With the unique magical ability of the immortal beast moon spirit, she gained a resonance with all the living things in this world. As if declaring sovereignty over a piece of barren land, the current mountain spirit of the Grand Cloud Mountain easily spread the tentacles of his primordial spirit throughout the vast mountains. Then, in Bai Shixian's perception, a giant black shadow blotted out the sky and the earth, causing people to feel fear at first sight. That was the extremely weak Guardian after its resurrection. Its primordial spirit was like a dried-up corpse that had been withered for tens of thousands of years, with a thick aura of death. However, even so, it was still a powerful enemy that no one could resist. Using primordial spirit to attack it would only make it die faster. Therefore, Bai Shixian, with her immortal beast magical ability, turned herself into a primordial spirit bridge to communicate with the Guardian, not to injure or defeat it, but to lay the foundation for Wang Lu's next move. She gently put her primordial spirit on the body of the Guardian. Because there was no hostility, and her presence was too subtle, it didn't arouse the other party's response. Wang Lu coldly said, Lu Li, prepare the brilliant rushing god sword. Lu Li has already entered the fighting state. Her 2 quick-witted eyes were as calm as ice. Upon hearing Wang Lu's command, her right hand pinched the sword sign and pressed it between her eyebrows, urging her primordial spirit to brew an astonishing sword intent. At this time, her primordial spirit cultivation base has already surpassed the half-virtual half-real stage. Coupled with the extreme strengthening of the brilliant sword heart, after this brilliant rushing god sword intent took shape, it seemed as if it was about to materialize. The surrounding cultivators with keen perception all felt a slight tingling pain. Go! The primordial spirit sword intent responded to the command and went straight to the vital part of the Guardian along the bridge that Bai Shixian had set up. The power of this sword strike alone was enough to make the nearby 10,000 art sect cultivators feel a splitting headache. Moreover, the brilliant rushing god sword intent was enough to defeat the primordial spirit of any of the people present. My goodness! Jianglu, Wang Yuanyu, Zhan Zai and the others all felt a chill in their hearts. This Lu Li turned out to have such a killer move. This extremely pure sword intent was sharper and more difficult to guard against than her fire-weak water sword and other 5-element swords. In the future, if they were to encounter it. However, this distraction was only for a moment. The heavy burden on their shoulders did not allow them to be distracted. The pressure from the Guardian was not reduced by the slightest bit. Lu Li's earth-shattering sword intent rushed forward, but it was like a stone sinking into the sea. How strong was the primordial spirit of this Guardian? However, Wang Lu was still calm. His primordial spirit was connected with Bai Shixian and Lu Li. Just now, the effect of the brilliant rushing god sword was still there. Resuscitation of the Guardian. Although the original Guardian was resurrected, Its primordial spirit was hazy and still in a coma. All of its actions relied on instinct. However, Lu Li's earth-shattering brilliant rushing god sword intent had the same effect as an alarm clock, which suddenly woke it up. And this was enough. What Wang Lu wanted was for it to wake up, because only a resuscitation of the guardian could possibly reveal a flaw. Lu Li, use the brilliant sword language to help me pass the following message. Sword language was not the unique skill of his big sister Xueqi. Lu Li, whose talent in the way of the sword was also at the peak, also had the ability to use sword language. Moreover, her sword language was easier to understand than Xueqi's, so it didn't need the other side to have the talent in the way of the sword to understand. And now, the trump card that Wang Lu had prepared was Lu Li's sword language. Using Bai Shishuan's magical ability to build a bridge and the brilliant rushing god sword intent to awaken the guardian, all in order to let it hear their conversation. As long as there was an opportunity for communication, the space available was too big. Azure, I'll say it later, and you'll use the sword language to relay it. During the process, I want you to circulate the clear heart mantra at the same time and calm your mind. You don't have to think about the meaning of what I say. You just have to pass it straight to the guardian. Okay. Although there were thousands of doubts in her heart, and she couldn't understand the intention of Wang Lu's instruction, Lu Li didn't ask a single word. Without hesitation, she nodded and began to use the clear heart technique. Suddenly, her clear heart seemed to be covered with frost and snow, becoming cold and tranquil, showing an unprecedented state of emptiness. Then, hearing Wang Lu's primordial spirit transmission, Lu Li, without hesitation, relied on her instinctive understanding and turned it into the brilliant sword language. Then, with a wave of her slender hand, she stimulated the sword intent and passed the following content to the guardian word for word. Grandson. Your AF * King F * Cur. Your mother was beeped by a dog. You came out of the beep. Your beep was beeped by a beep. An indescribable viciousness was transmitted through the channel of the primordial spirit in the form of sword language. After a moment of silence, the guardian released a world-destroying fury. It was a roar that came directly from her primordial spirit, the supreme heart fire. And at the moment when the heart fire set the prairie ablaze, Bai Shishuan very cleverly hid her primordial spirit between the mountains and the earth, avoiding being caught in the crossfire. As for Lu Li, who directly faced the wrath of the guardian. Heh, you want to hurt someone in front of me? A dazzling golden sword shadow, like an eternally motionless mountain rock, unwaveringly isolated the boundless heart fire of the guardian. Like an eyesore that blocked the way, it protected Lu Li behind him. This was also a sword of the essence soul. Wang Lu had recently mastered it, the formless immovable sword. Receiving the perfect protection from Wang Lu, Lu Li was oblivious to everything around her. While urging the Clear Heart Sutra, she continued to talk according to the content of the sound transmission from Wang Lu. You're a beep, your mother is a beep, your father is a beep, and your master is also a beep. The primordial spirit fire was blocked outside, and the vicious voice continued. The guardian was boiling with anger. All of its attention was focused on Wang Lu and Lu Li. This split second of distraction broke the balance that was originally maintained by instinct, which immediately affected the state of the body. There's a flaw. Zhonglu, who was standing in the front line, and Zhan Zai, who was constantly monitoring the state and deducing the data, simultaneously roared. The next moment, the light on the ice lake suddenly intensified several times. Everyone, regardless of everything, seized this rare flaw and launched an unprecedented fierce offensive with 100,000 talismans. Chapter 235. In his 10 years of immortal cultivation, this was the first time that Wang Lu encountered a strong opponent that was truly suitable for a professional adventurer. First, the opponent's strength was strong enough. If it was a fair fight in the arena, even 100 Wang Lu wouldn't be able to stop the Guardian's attack. Second, the opponent's weakness was obvious enough. With the 100,000 talismans reverse meridian circulation method, the magical power directly penetrated into the Guardian's body. Third, the opponent's weakness was stupid enough. Because it had just been resurrected, the Guardian's primordial spirit was confused, and its mind was in chaos. It simply couldn't think like a normal creature, and its earth-shattering power couldn't be displayed. Moreover, it was easy to be calculated by some simple and ridiculous tricks. If it were any normal opponent, it would be impossible for them to fall into an irrepressible rage because of dirty words. However, after hearing the sword language,
The Guardian ignored the great crisis of the 100,000 talismans invasion on its body, and set off the monstrous heart fire to deal with Lu Li.
And Wang Lu propped up his non-phase unmovable heart sword, firmly blocking the way, motionless like a mountain. However, the Guardian unexpectedly didn't know how to change its target. It still locked on Lu Li and continued to urge the heart fire to push and spread forward. Although its power was impressive, it was not aimed at Wang Lu. Therefore, Wang Lu was able to resist it with ease. In professional terms, this was the magical effect of blocking position. Taunting, blocking position, pulling the hatred, this was the entire job of the three people of Lingjian School. As a mobile force, Wang Lu didn't need to fight the Guardian to the death. He just needed to create the output condition for the rest of his teammates. And his teammates didn't let him down. Shengjing Sect, Kunlun Sect, and 10,000 Arts Sect people jointly exerted their strength. Under the infusion of powerful magical power, the 100,000 talismans were stimulated one by one, creating one strong destruction after another in the Guardian's body. The Guardian's body continued to tremble, and cracks appeared on the surface of the mountain. Not long after, it seemed to be covered with a vast layer of spider web. Gravel and sand slid down like a waterfall, and the Guardian's body seemed to be surrounded by a layer of grayish-yellow mist. Of course, the destruction inside the mountain was 100 times more intense than on the surface. However, the Guardian turned a blind eye to this, because in its ignorant knowledge, its greatest hatred was not the pain in its body, but the vicious curse that the little bug transmitted through the sharp sword language. Unfortunately, its ignorant mind could not allow it to think too much, so it only clumsily activated the heart fire, trying to burn the sword language and the little bug, completely ignoring the fact that its body was rapidly falling apart. The stalemate lasted for a long time. Although the destructive power of the 100,000 talismans was very powerful, the Guardian's vitality was equally astonishing. It turned out that the disciples of the four sects had underestimated the Guardian's strength. The people of Lingjian School had played a role beyond expectation. Wang Lu, with his professional adventurer's means, firmly attracted the Guardian's attention. As for the rest of the people, they only needed to concentrate on the reverse meridian circulation method to destroy the Guardian's vitality. It stood to reason that if everything went well, they should be able to kill it soon. However, no one thought that the Guardian had just been resurrected and was on the verge of death. They obviously had 3 days of arrangement and 100,000 talismans to magnify the destructive power of the cultivators by thousands of times. But in the end, when Zhonglu and the others were almost exhausted, the Guardian fell down with a loud bang. With the continuous accumulation of internal destruction, the Guardian's vitality finally came to an end. From the top of the mountain, a large amount of lava and dust gushed out and went straight to the sky, and then the mountain was quickly covered with a layer of gray color. The mountain suddenly stopped, and its height was compressed by a section. At this point, the battle ended. Everyone felt a burst of amazement. According to the original plan, all the arrangements had a considerable amount of surplus, and the margin of error was very high. However, the actual situation was that the margin of error in killing the Guardian was almost zero. Even the Lingjian School had to perform exceptionally to barely take down the opponent. Among them, if there was a slight mistake in any of the links, the result would be total annihilation. What a terrifying opponent. Feeling the signal from the Ice Lake array that the Guardian's vitality was gone, Zhonglu finally breathed a sigh of relief. He then wiped the black blood from his mouth and nose and sincerely sighed with emotion. The Guardian's vitality was simply unimaginable. Perhaps in the Wanxian League, even in the Royal Soldier Sect, which was famous for its powerful body, only a few people could be comparable to it. Fortunately, they didn't need to be enemies with the Guardian at its peak. However, even so, the cultivators of the four sects had to cooperate with each other in order to barely pass this test. While recollecting the battle just now, Zhonglu had to admit that it was impossible to defeat this Guardian by relying on the strength of Shengjing Sect alone, and this was just the 4th level of the Sword Tomb. The cooperation of the four sects seemed to be just a joke at first, but since the difficulty of the Sword Tomb far exceeded the expectation, even if they joined forces with the other 3 sects, it was also a good choice. In the battle just now, although the main force was Shengjing Sect, the role of any other sect was pivotal. Thinking to this, Zhonglu changed his original overbearing attitude and said, "Everyone, take a break and restore your magical power as soon as possible. If any of the fellow Taoists here has been injured by the resonance just now, we have the best healing elixir here. Please feel free to use it." Although his tone was still somewhat superior, it was rare for Shengjing Sect to show such a generous attitude, so the cultivators of Kunlun sect and 10,000 Art sect had no reason to refuse. After exchanging greetings for a while, they became friends with each other, and the atmosphere gradually warmed up. Only the people of Lingjian school were still maverick, coldly hiding on the side, completely not participating in the greetings. Just now, in the fierce battle, Wang Lu and the other two people took great credit. However, under the protection of Non-Fei's sword, the three of them were actually unscathed. Compared to the bleak Shangjing sect people, they were simply noble and elegant. Their number was the smallest, but their style seemed to be stronger than Shangjing sect people. Zhonglu cast a glance at them and inwardly sneered. The people of Lingjian school indeed had some means, but even Shangjing sect people could put down their arrogance when needed. If they were so maverick, in the joint action of the four sects, they would only end up being isolated. Of course, in the action, they might not deliberately frame each other, but in the final distribution of the spoils, the isolated party would definitely suffer a big loss. However, this was a misunderstanding. Wang Lu and the others had important things to discuss. Lu Li, you said you found something. What do you mean? Lu Li earnestly said, at the last moment before the Guardian's life was cut off, I clearly felt that it seemed to have released two different but equally strong emotions to me. It seemed to be regret, but also relief, like. Lu Li awkwardly wrinkled her brows. She wanted to describe it more vividly, but found that her ability to express it was somewhat unable to keep up. Wang Lu was silent for a moment, and then tried to explain. Resuscitation after thousands of years of sleep, but before it could experience more of life, it was sent into the darkness again. Of course there would be regret. As for relief, it should have died a long time ago, it's just that it couldn't die thoroughly. Now that it's dead thoroughly, perhaps it could re-enter the reincarnation cycle, which is not bad, so it's relieved. For such an explanation, Lu Li found it difficult to understand, and even more difficult to accept, but she didn't know what to say. In the silence, Bai Shixian expressed her opinion. Senior brother, I think we shouldn't kill it. Wang Lu asked, what's the reason? Bai Shixian said, because it didn't do anything bad. The hare and pheasant didn't do anything bad, but they still ended up in the human stomach. This is the law of nature, so it can't explain anything. But, in general, do you think I did something wrong? Bai Shixian hesitated. Not really. It's just that I always feel that this guardian is really pitiful. Perhaps it's because we're both mountain spirits. Sorry, I'm a bit confused. Wang Lu also touched her head. Don't think too much. Although you're born smart, not hopelessly stupid like little Lu Li, it's still too early for you to think about these things. Lu Li protested. I'm not stupid. Wang Lu looked at Lu Li. Really? Then I'll give you a question. If you can figure it out, then you're smart. Prove that any even number greater than 2 can be expressed as the sum of two prime numbers. Okay, take your time to think about it. Then, ignoring Lu Li, Wang Lu also fell into deep thought. This is only the 4th level, but the difficulty has already broken the limit. Is there a problem with the way to play, or? However, just when Wang Lu vaguely grasped something, suddenly, a burst of roar of rolling rocks surged. A strong shock came from under their feet, causing everyone to simultaneously stop their conversation and turn their eyes to the mountain not far away. As the guardian's corpse, after the lava erupted and the mountain shrunk, the mountain took on a gray color. Everyone thought that this was the end, but unexpectedly, there was another change. The mountain suddenly swayed, causing a violent earthquake in a radius of dozens of miles. And the cracks on the surface of the mountain, driven by an unknown force, continued to expand. Then, the earth suddenly bent down, as if a hole was opened at the foot of the mountain. The whole mountain sunk down at a jaw-dropping speed. Even the volcanic ash that spewed into the sky fell back. In just a moment, all that was left in front of everyone was a plain, as well as a clear sky. That towering mountain seemed to have never existed. Zhonglu looked around in bewilderment and guessed. Is this a sign that the door to the next level is about to open? Zhou Mumu somewhat dejectedly said, that big guy is useless, so he died without a whole corpse? Zhan Zai excitedly guessed. Is this the internal recycling mechanism of the sword tomb? Unexpectedly, the cultivators from more than 10,000 years ago have such an advanced idea. This is a very important discovery, and it's necessary to revise the relevant records. While they were talking, suddenly, on the plain where the mountain disappeared, 8 stone doors appeared in a circle.
Each stone door was engraved with a simple and unadorned character. Although after thousands of years, the characters had changed a lot, there was no lack of knowledgeable people present, so they could recognize them at a glance. Filial piety, fraternity, loyalty, faith, propriety, righteousness, integrity, and shame.
Chapter 236.
Filial piety, loyalty, faith, propriety, righteousness, honor, and shame? When they saw these 8 words, the people present were stunned. Even those with relatively weak knowledge knew that these 8 words were the 8 virtues of the 9 regions that had been passed down for more than 10,000 years, the 8 virtues put forward by the sages a long time ago.
But at this time, the 8 virtues appeared.
Could it be that the master of this sword tomb was the great sage who put forward the 8 virtues?
That couldn't be, right?
They never heard that the great sage was a sword cultivator. Then what were these 8 doors? Did they have to find the most important one among the 8 doors in order to enter the next level? But these 8 virtues were not superior or inferior. Or did they have to randomly choose one as long as they felt confident in that one? While many of the cultivators were in doubt, that indifferent and stiff voice once again sounded in everyone's mind. The legacy of the sword god should not be passed on to the heretical path, and the successor should have good virtues. However, morality changes with the times, changes with the situation. In times of peace, people are gentle, kind, respectful, and thrifty. In troubled times of war, there are people who exchange their children for food. I don't know what the world will be like after thousands of years, and what morality will be like. However, I know that virtue is relative. Therefore, based on the 8 virtues of the sages, I set up 8 tests. The one with the most virtues wins, and the winner passes. The one with the most virtues wins, and the winner passes? There was a lot of information in this paragraph, and the most important part was the last 2 sentences.
8 gates, 8 virtues. The person who occupied more of them would be able to pass.
For a moment, everyone fell into deep thought, and no one said a word. After a while, Hai Yun Fan of the 10,000 Arts sect shook his head and exclaimed, "What a powerful senior. He actually designed the knockout test. He's really a master at grasping people's mind."
Wang Lu chuckled.
Yes, they really have grasped the key of morality. There is comparison, there is morality. To be able to enter this ancient sword tomb and reach this point, whether it's in the past or now, they must be the elite of that time. Using them as the moral yardstick, the difference would not be too far. Then, a competition mechanism is established to select the relatively higher moral character from these people, which is indeed easier to select the real moral role model.
Hai Yun Fan said, "That's right.
Perhaps in some turbulent times, when etiquette is broken, people's hearts are evil, and there are no saints in the world, but as long as one has a little more virtue than the people around him, it's enough. This is really an excellent social problem, and it's worth studying." The cultivators of the 10,000 Arts sect nodded. Among them, Yi Feifei, Zhao Zhongyuan, and the others were eager to give it a try. They couldn't wait to consult the ancient books and establish the model. Zhonglu of Shengjing's sect couldn't stand it anymore. He coldly snorted and interrupted. "Is this the time to admire?
The victors would pass. In other words, the losers would not pass. How many victors were there in this round? 1, 2. How many people do we have here? 30? 40?
Zhou Mumu also said, "This checkpoint is really strange. Why did they have to design this kind of competition mechanism?
Must someone be eliminated first?"
As soon as these words were spoken, the atmosphere instantly froze. Zhou Mumu was a straightforward person, so she inadvertently pointed out a sensitive topic. After all, the 4 sects were not of one mind. Just now, in the fight with the Guardian, they finally established a cooperative relationship. However, in this sword tomb steel, the one with the most virtues would win, which made the cooperative relationship seem precarious. If there was a win, there would be a loss. After this round, someone would inevitably be eliminated. Moreover, it was very likely that most people would be eliminated. Thus, what kind of cooperation was there? After a while, Zhonglu inwardly made a decision and coldly said, "Humph, that's fine. In any case, in the end, someone would be eliminated." Zhanzai said, "That's not necessarily true. There are 8 sects here, and we have 4 sections. If we do a simple division, as long as each sect gets 2 virtues, wouldn't we be able to pass the test together?" Zhonglu ridiculed,
You people of 10,000 Arts sect always boast of being smart, but how come you don't use your brain when you speak? If we can pass the test by equal distribution, aren't we also equal now? Each side has 0 virtues, so why don't we see the next door open? Zhang Zai was suddenly at a loss for words. Zhonglu's countenance turned serious as he said in a sinking voice. The inheritance of this sword tomb is not a gentle and amiable child's play. From the second level of the sword tomb, it's full of killing intent. Just now in the fight with the Guardian, we were almost wiped out. After experiencing this, don't tell me you still can't see our situation? If we want to continue to move forward, we must have the awareness to overcome all obstacles, to break our heads and bleed, and even to perish. This trial of the 8 virtues will definitely require us to fight and fight, just like how the primal land rears goo and trample on the corpses of others to obtain victory. This theory was indeed persuasive, but there were also many people who disagreed. Yi Feifei couldn't help but open her mouth to argue. However, before they could say anything, Wang Lu lightly said, "We haven't even pushed the door open, what's the use of just talking at the door?" How the owner of this sword tomb wants to play, none of us can say it. Moreover, just because of the words of the owner of the sword tomb, a line of words on the steel, our 4 sects have to fight each other at the door, don't you think it's stupid? At least let's go in and take a look first. Zhang Lu glanced at Wang Lu, nodded, and said, "Yes, at present, we only know that the one with the most wins, but the specific rules are vague. We should go in and take a look first. Behind these 8 doors are 8 tests, why don't we start from the first one?" With that, Zhang Lu pointed at the filial piety door. Wang Lu said, "Filial piety is the first of all virtues. I wonder which filial son or grandson would like to come with me to take a look." The scene briefly froze. Naturally, no one wanted to be a filial son or grandson, so no one answered his question. Zhang Lu coldly humphed. "We don't know anything about the situation behind the door, so there's no need to send out all of our troops. I suggest that each sect send out 1/3 of their people, while the rest stay here." Wang Lu was the first to agree, no objection. Seeing Wang Lu's attitude, the people of 10,000 Arts sect thought for a moment and then agreed. Although Zhou Mumu had doubts, she could only follow. "Very well, then please send out your people," Zhang Lu said, and then turned to his assistants, Wang Yue brother and sister, and said, Luan Yun, you two lead the team to go in and take a look at the situation. If there's any change, save your life first." The 2 siblings said yes in unison, and then selected 6 cultivators to form a team. According to the 1/3 ratio, Shangjing sect's team of 8 people was just right. Kunlun sect's team was formed by Zhou Mumu and a middle-aged cultivator, while 10,000 Arts sect's team was formed by Hai Yun Fan and Yi Feifei. As for Lingjian school, according to the ratio, there was only 1 person. However, Wang Lu directly pointed at Lu Li, indicating that the 2 of them should go together. Zhang Lu just cast a glance at Bai Shixian and didn't say anything. After all, Lingjian school was weak, so 1 more person or 1 less person wouldn't affect the overall situation. Shangjing sect, whether it was inside or outside, had the strength to suppress everything by hard means. Moreover, from another point of view, Wang Lu's willingness to leave Bai Shixian alone here was also a good thing for Shangjing sect. Although Bai Shixian's magical ability was astonishing, she was not good at fighting. Although she had far more vigorous magical power than any of the people present, in a real fight, Zhang Lu was confident that he could defeat her within 3 moves. Staying here as a hidden hostage was also a good thing. Very well, since the members have been decided, let's get ready to open the gate. Not wanting to delay any longer, Zhang Lu immediately urged. Everyone didn't delay and directly walked toward the filial piety gate. Along the way, Hai Yun Fan and Wang Lu's eyes gently touched, and then, as if by prior agreement, they simultaneously smiled. A few days ago, the covenant between the 2 of them was finally going to play its role. Actually, what Zhang Lu said just now was right. In the Sword Tomb's inheritance trial, each level seemed cold and ruthless. Perhaps it was really like raising a poisonous insect, where the participants would fight each other to the death in order to determine the final winner. However, it's good that you're clear about this in your heart. Why bother saying it out loud? Shangjing sect was the only big sect, and if they really fought, none of the other sects would be their opponent. Thus, the situation would inevitably force the other 3 sects to join forces. What Shangjing sect relied on was nothing more than being driven by the environment.
The other three sects also had to scheme against each other, and thus couldn't cooperate in good faith. In fact, from the point of view of the vast majority of cases in which the weak joined forces against the strong, most of them ended in the victory of the strong. There was no other reason than those who would rather fight against the flood than to give up the immediate benefits were the mainstream in history.
Perhaps there were bystanders who sighed with emotion. How could those people be so stupid? And in fact they were that stupid. However, this time, Zhang miscalculated.
At least, the foundation of the cooperation between Spirit Sword Sect and 10,000 Art Sect was very solid. There was no infighting. Because Hai Yunfan had long made up his mind to listen to Wang Lu's instructions from the beginning to the end, without any second thoughts.
A few days ago, the importance of the covenant was perfectly reflected. The most important one was that the final benefit should be divided according to the contribution of each party.
In other words, even if only one person reached the end and got all the benefits according to the covenant, he would have to distribute it to the other teammates who fell in front of him.
If it was difficult to distribute the treasure, the sect would compensate. Therefore, Hai Yunfan didn't care about who could reach the end. If the 10,000 Art Sect could pass, it would naturally be good. If not, it would be a good choice to fully cooperate with Wang Lu to strive for victory and then sit back and wait for the bonus. And based on the current situation, the best choice for the 10,000 Art Sect was to trust the judgment of Wang Lu. No matter how many disputes he had, Wang Lu had never tore up the covenant.
On the contrary, he was a man of his word, and he always took care of his own people.
In fact, in Hai Yunfan's view, among the 8 virtues, Wang Lu had at least occupied 2 of them. It was just that, judging from the situation of this sword tomb trial, perhaps it wouldn't be easy to win the 2 virtues. Before long, the group of people arrived at the front of the stone door. The stone door rumbled open, revealing a deep and bottomless dark passage.
"I'll go first."
Wang Lu lifted the sword of Mount Kuan, and his non-phase sword light bloomed as he rushed to enter the door. Wang Yuan and Wan Yun of Shangjing sect slightly hesitated, but they didn't immediately stop him. After all, no one knew what the world behind the door was like. Was it a test of the heart demon illusion, or something else? Since Wang Lu was willing to act as the vanguard, and his non-phase sword was also famous for being good at defense, it would be good for him to explore the way. After Wang Lu, it was naturally Lu Li, Shangjing sect, and finally, Kunlun Immortal sect and 10,000 Art sect. After the group of people entered the stone door, the thick slate slowly closed, covering the dark passage. It also cut off the connection between inside and outside. However, no one was surprised by this. In the passage, Wang Lu took the lead. However, after walking for a while, there were no guardians blocking the way, nor were there any sinister traps. The front of the passage gradually opened up until the end, where a narrow stone chamber was the end. The stone chamber was not big, and the situation inside was clear at a glance. When Wang Lu looked inside, he immediately exclaimed, "What the F***ck?" Chapter 237. What the hell? Hearing Wang Lu's exclamation, the team behind him immediately tensed up. Wang Lu's non-phase sword was famous for its good defense. In terms of defense and vitality, even the most arrogant Shangjing sect people didn't dare to say that they could surpass Wang Lu. Coupled with his quick-wittedness and reputation as a professional adventurer, having him as the vanguard was the safest. And if there was a scene that could make Wang Lu exclaim in surprise, perhaps it would be quite a scene. Needless to say, the Shangjing sect cultivators behind Wang Lu immediately entered their combat state. Wang Yue brother and sister simultaneously took out their 7 orifices, multicolored treasure chest. The rest of the cultivators each took out their magical treasures. This team of 8 people, without exception, had a low-rank spiritual treasure.
"Brother Wang, what's going on?"
Hai Yunfan, who was at the end of the team, immediately asked. Wang Lu waved his hand and loudly said, "Don't panic, it's not a life-threatening situation." With that, he waited for everyone to slowly withdraw from their combat state before he added, "But, it's likely to be another form of life-threatening situation." With that, Wang Lu stepped aside from the exit, allowing the others to come forward and see the scene inside the stone room. Wang Yu and her brother looked at each other and then took a step forward. The woman was dressed in a 7-colored feather dress, and her figure was as agile as a spirit bird. However, after entering the stone room, this agile woman only took a glance inside, and a moment later, her eyes widened as she incredulously covered her mouth and exclaimed, What is this?" Everyone rushed in one after another, and seeing the scene inside the stone room, all of them were surprised. Even if they encountered a supreme-level guardian here, they wouldn't be surprised, or they would suddenly fall into a big dream, which was also very normal. However, there was nothing in the stone room, only a stone table, and on the table, there were 2 piles of metal cards that shone with a mysterious luster. The 2 piles of round cards were written in ancient characters, parents and children, which seemed to show an ominous meaning. And above the metal cards, a string of strangely shaped characters were engraved on the stone wall, which could be translated as follows. Rules 1. The trial procedure is as follows. 1. The trial taker can freely choose a parent card and designate one person to wear a child card. 2. The holder of the parent card must nurture the designated holder of the child card and gift the item with the highest value to the other party. 3. The holder of the children's card who receives the gift must return an item of double or more value to his parents. This process can be regarded as filial piety. 4. The trial taker who has fulfilled filial piety will be qualified to pass. 2. Relevant requirements. 1. Parents and children must correspond to one another. Not one to many or many to one. 2. Once the identity card is selected, it will be completely bound and cannot be changed. 3. Each person has and can only have one identity card. 4. Parenting and filial piety can only be performed once. Once one party refuses to perform the parenting or filial piety, it will be regarded as giving up the trial. V. The process of nurturing and filial piety is irreversible, and gifts cannot be recovered. 6. Any act that violates the rules of the trial will be regarded as a violation of the rules and will be disqualified. The rules were not long, but after reading the rules, everyone cursed in their hearts. What was going on? Zhou Mumu was the most puzzled. What kind of filial piety trial is this? Wang Lu also sighed. The owner of the sword tomb must have lived in an era with distorted values. How could he design such a ridiculous rule? Regardless of whether it reflects filial piety or not, as soon as this rule comes out, half of the people will be directly cut off. Some people who were slow in thinking asked subconsciously, cut off half of the people? Wang Lu said, look carefully, only filial piety can pass the trial. Only children can be filial piety. Children and parents correspond to one another. It is clear that those who choose the parent card will be eliminated. Ah! A few people who were quick to take the round card suddenly stopped and understood. Yes, parents chose the parent card. As parents, how can they be filial piety? Regardless of whether they had thought of this before or not, after listening to Wang Lu's explanation of the rules, they all had their own ideas and began to be silent. While everyone was silent, Wang Lu said, however, being eliminated is not entirely a bad thing. According to the rules, those who choose the parent card will get twice the gift from their children. This will undoubtedly make a lot of money, which can be regarded as compensation for being eliminated. Seeing everyone's thoughtful look, Wang Lu smirked and said, if there is a sinister person, you can also use this parent card as a license to plunder. For example, if I fancy fellow Taoist Shengjing Sect's Yin and Yang treasure chest, and I only want the low-rank spiritual treasure sword of Mount Kuan as a gift, fellow Taoist Shengjing Sect must return it with double the value, and I can get that middle-rank spiritual treasure. Isn't that very profitable? Don't even think about it. The Wang Yue siblings angrily shouted in unison. Ha ha ha, of course, I'm just joking. I also like my family's sword of Mount Kuan, so I don't intend to give up. With that, Wang Lu continued to size up the Shengjing Sect's cultivators with malicious intent. Then, from another point of view, this is also a shortcut for the local tyrants to spend money to pass this trial. You see, in this trial, half of the people must be eliminated, but no one wants to be the other half, right? Although as children, to fulfill their filial piety, no one here is a poor ghost, right? Everyone has to compete, each using their own means. Who dares to say that they will be able to laugh in the end? However, if some people are willing to pay enough price, perhaps they can avoid a lot of pointless fights and safely pass this trial. The Shengjing Sect's cultivators looked at each other and chose to be silent. Although Wang Lu's statement was malicious, if one carefully thought about it, there was nothing wrong with it. Right now, in this filial piety trial, regardless of whether it had anything to do with filial piety, from the point of view of passing this trial, it was indeed very cruel. There was no room for debate. Because of the rules, half of the people who participated in the trial would be directly eliminated. However, at this time, it seemed like for the sake of insurance, Xueqi sect sent 8 people to enter the trial, but this time they were caught in their own trap. The 4 sects had a total of 14 people, so the maximum number of people who could pass the trial was 7. Even if they could suppress the other 3 sects, making Wang Lu and the others have no choice but to hold the parent card and give up the trial, the quota was still not enough. Wang Yue's siblings communicated with each other through primordial spirit. Luan Yun said, "Sister, what do you think?" "I think there's no problem with Wang Lu's statement, at least on the surface. Let's think of a way to make the other 3 sects give up. As for our own problem, let junior brother Tang sacrifice himself." However, Luan Yu didn't dare to think of things so lightly. "Our own problem is easy to discuss, and it's not difficult for us to distribute it. I'm afraid that there's a conspiracy behind what Wang Lu just said. The rules of this filial piety trial are too strange, and people can't understand it. Although on the surface, as long as we find half of the people who will be sacrificed, we can let the other half pass. However, those 3 sects are not easy to deal with. How could they be willing to hold the parent card and give up the trial? Under this rule, coercion by force doesn't have much significance. After they hold the parent card, if they don't designate our people, we can't do anything about it," Luan Yun said. "Then we can lure them with benefits. As long as we show our Xueqi sect's unwillingness to give up, coupled with sufficient compensation, they have no reason to be stubborn. They're not like those royal soldier sect who don't know what's good for them and can't distinguish right from wrong. As long as they're willing to talk about benefits, I think we can always give them a price tag that's enough to convince them." Luan Yu was still somewhat hesitant, so Luan Yun urged, "Sister, senior brother Zhonglu has full trust in us, that's why he let us lead the team. Moreover, looking at the situation of this filial piety trial, it's very likely that the filial piety trial won't open for the second time. In other words, the people outside are doomed to not get one of the 8 virtues of filial piety." Upon hearing this, Luan Yu also slowly nodded. "Yes, our Xueqi sect team lineup is strong, but at this time, we are at a disadvantage." Because of a moment of caution, senior brother Zhonglu and several other junior brothers and sisters whose strength is at the top of the list have lost their virtue. On the other hand, Kunlun sect and Spirit Sword sect, although the number of people is small, their core members didn't miss the opportunity. In this 8 virtues trial, the outcome is likely to be 1 or 2 virtues. The disadvantage of losing the initiative is really terrible. Luan Yun said, "Right now, we have no way to open the door to let senior brother Zhonglu come in, but we can at least make Zhou Mumu, Wang Lu, and the others lose the initiative. Everyone is still on the same starting line." "Very well, then let's do it." While the Wang Yue siblings were discussing the countermeasures, the people from the other 3 sects were not idle. Hai Yunfan, on behalf of the 10,000 Arts sect, was the first to show his stance. Through primordial spirit he said, "Brother Wang, please guide us." Wang Lu was both angry and amused as he scolded, "Little Hai, can't you have some dignity? Your senior sister Yi is still watching from the side. If you keep being so humble, when will you be able to win the beauty's hand?" Regarding this kind of joke, Hai Yunfan now has a very high resistance. He indifferently smiled. "In this kind of test, it's really shameful to want to keep face. Isn't it normal to ask a professional for guidance on something that you're not good at? Moreover, since the mountain worship meeting 5 years ago, Brother Wang has some weight in the hearts of us martial brothers and sisters. Senior sister Feifei has no objection to your guidance. In fact, even the people of Kunlun sect have entrusted me to communicate with you." Wang Lu laughed. "It seems like the pressure from Xueqi sect is really not small." "Yes, and just now, I have hinted the matter of our 2 sects alliance to Zhou Mumu, and she is quite moved." Wang Lu said, It's certainly good to have the intention to cooperate. However, let me say it first, if you want my help, I can. But first, I'm not like big sister Zhu Shiyao, so I can't guarantee a foolproof victory. So, if there's a mistake, if you fail, don't come crying. Second, you must have 100% trust in me. Otherwise, please find a way yourself." Hai Yunfan said, "Rest assured, I have this awareness." "Good, then you just need to remember one thing. Do your best to fight for the children card." Hai Yunfan gawked. "Do I really want to fight for the children card? Isn't that nonsense? If I don't fight for the children card, how can I be filial?" Hai Yunfan explained. The main thing is, according to my understanding of Brother Wang, just now, you said those high-sounding words, but your real intention is likely to be reversed. However, since Brother Wang said so, then we'll try our best to fight for it. It's just that, according to the rules, isn't the children card designated by the parents card? If you can't directly fight for the children card, then strive to let other people get the parents card, and then designate you as the children card. With that, Wang Lu slightly sneered. Just like what Shangjing sect is about to do. Hai Yunfan sighed. Unexpectedly, the test after the filial piety gate actually evolved into such a situation. What kind of era of destruction did the master of this sword tomb live in? Yes, the parents card is directly out of the game, while the children card can pass. It's called filial piety, but it's actually a fraud. You're tuning in to the Xueqi's Martial Arts Saga YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.